Chapter 736. This was the first time Jiang Yuqing called her this, and Chu Luiyue spent a lot of effort to control her expression. What's wrong with this fellow? However, Song Qingyan at the side was greatly shocked. Yuqing, why you just called her? Jiang Yuqing looks gentle and polite, but he's actually very arrogant. Especially now that his status is different, it's even harder for normal people to get close to him. But now he actually called Chu Luiyue so intimately. When did the relationship between the two of them become so close? Jiang Yuqing glanced at Song Qingyan and smiled lightly as he explained, "Oh right. You probably don't know, but when I met with danger previously, I relied on Lu Yu to help me escape. Speaking of which, I owe her half my life." Mu Qinghe and the rest had all seen this scene with their own eyes, so they naturally wouldn't refute him. As for the rest, they had more or less accepted Chu Luiyue's help, so they couldn't thank her enough, let alone say anything. Song Qingyan was completely dazed. At the side, Yang Qina widened her eyes in shock and she even forgot to cry. "Why you're saying, Chu Luiyue saved you?" asked Song Qingyan in disbelief. Jiang Yuqing nodded and pointed at the crowd behind him. Actually, for the people behind to be able to come out, almost all of them helped. Chu Luiyue's abilities alone are limited, so she naturally can't take on everything. However, no one could deny that she had played the most crucial role in this process. Song Qingyan looked behind him in a daze. Only then did he see the dense mass of people. At a rough glance, there were at least 300 to 400 people. All of this, Chu Luiyue helped. Song Qingyan's heart suffered a huge impact and he didn't dare to believe it. But the person who said this was Jiang Yuqing, so he had no choice but to believe it. Recalling Chu Luiyue's swift and decisive manner, Song Qingyan gradually recovered his senses. Seems like Chu Luiyue really has some abilities. Not to mention that Lei Laosi, he's very capable, but he seems to listen to Chu Luiyue a lot. With his help, it doesn't seem impossible that Chu Luiyue could do all of this. As for why she's safe and sound, that's because she wasn't swept down from the start, and she only came down when we wanted to find one. Jiang Yuqing gave a simple explanation of the situation with just a few words. He said it calmly, but it was like a stone smashed into Song's heart. At this moment he finally understood how laughable the words he'd said earlier were. In front of Jiang Yuqing. "No. I've become a joke in everyone's eyes." Song Qingyan hurriedly glanced around, and as expected he discovered that many people were looking at him with unfriendly gazes. Most of them were actually black guards. Whispers could be heard. "Miss Chu is very warm-hearted. She has been helping people along the way. She won't attack anyone, right?" "I think so too." Purple Shao Sword Sect. "I remember that they wanted to find trouble with Miss Chu at Pingliang Square previously. I'm afraid the bad guys are making the first move." These people didn't speak loudly, but the space was dim and narrow, so any sound could be heard clearly. Song Qingyan was extremely embarrassed and felt as if there was a dagger at his back. Jiang Yuqing smiled. "Qingyan, it seems like you misunderstood something." Song Qingyan's breath was stuck in his chest. After an intense internal struggle, he finally accepted his fate and clenched his teeth. Probably, just as he wanted to brush this matter aside, Lei Laosi crossed his arms and spoke lazily. "You think it's over with just a misunderstanding? You criticized us quite a bit just now, right? Now that things are clear, you don't intend to apologize?" Who did Song Qingyan apologize to? But in this situation he didn't seem to have a second choice. He could only brace himself and speak to Chu Luiyue. "Sorry." It was just a short word, but it seemed to be squeezed out from the gaps of his teeth. Lei Laosi dug his ears. "What did you say? You're too soft. I didn't hear you." Song Qingyan took a deep breath and could only raise his voice. "I'm sorry. I misunderstood you guys." Then the veins on his forehead could be faintly seen. Yang Qin, was originally hiding behind him, hugging his arm and grabbing his hand with both hands. Song Qingyan used so much strength that he actually subconsciously held Yang Qin's hand tightly. Her expression changed and she almost shouted out in pain. Her hand bones were about to be crushed. Chu Luiyue watched this scene as if he was watching a show. Although she was a little surprised that Jiang Yuqing spoke up for her, she didn't feel anything in her heart and even felt a little nauseous. However, since Jiang Yuqing admitted that he owed her a favor, then it would be a waste if she didn't accept it. Mu Qinghe took 2 steps forward and pointed in a certain direction. "I heard some commotion over here just now. Is it because of those 2 people?" Chu Liyue followed his finger and looked over. He was referring to the two people who died just now. That's right. Chu Liyue nodded and briefly explained what had happened. Of course, it was inevitable that she would mention that she wanted to help, but was rejected by Song Qingyan. Chu Liyue spoke casually as if he did not take it to heart. However, to everyone's ears, they felt that Song Qingyan did not know what was good for him. He actually had the cheek to complain about Chu Liyue just now? Although no one said anything, they all felt some disdain for Song Qingyan in their hearts. Song Qingyan felt as if he was sitting on pins and needles. This was the first time he felt so embarrassed in front of these people. If not for the fact that he was worried about encountering more danger, he would have left immediately. Yang Qing'er gently tugged at his sleeve and said softly. Only then did Song Qingyan let go of her hand. Yang Qing'er's wrist was almost broken. She looked down nervously and saw that there seemed to be a red blood stain on her sleeve. She was shocked and immediately wanted to bandage it. The other party seems to have become stronger than before. We have to hurry. Upon hearing this, Yang Qing'er's expression changed slightly and she suddenly said hesitantly, "Are you looking for the person controlling the tree branch? I remember that the tree root flew from that direction." As she spoke, she raised her hand and pointed in a direction. It was dark all around and no one knew what she was pointing at. Jiang Yuqing frowned slightly. Really? Yang Qing'er nodded timidly. Chu Liyue narrowed her eyes and was about to speak when she suddenly felt an itch by her ear. She turned to look at Dumpling only to see Dumpling flying straight ahead. Target, Yang Qing'er. Chu Liyue found it strange. She was about to ask Dumpling to come back when Dumpling flew over Yang Qing'er's head. Yang Qing'er was frightened and screamed. She retreated in a hurry, but Dumpling flapped her wings and she fell. "Don't touch me!" She shouted in panic, but she suddenly felt a sharp pain on her wrist. Rip! Half of her sleeve was torn off. A terrifying scarlet wound on her wrist was exposed in front of everyone. A strong smell of blood suddenly erupted. It was extremely similar to the smell of the tree root. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 737. Everything happened too quickly. When the wound on her wrist tore open again, Yang Qing'er knew it was bad. Song Qingyan originally wanted to help her up, but his expression changed slightly when he smelled the smell. "Qing'er, what happened to you?" A fierce look flashed across Yang Qing'er's eyes. Without another word, she turned and fled. Her speed was actually much faster than the realm she had displayed before. Dumpling immediately followed. In the blink of an eye, it rushed to the opposite side of Yang Qing'er. It flapped its wings. A scarlet flame suddenly flew out and condensed into a barrier in the air. Yang Qing'er was caught off guard. By the time she discovered the flame boundary in front of her, it was already too late to stop. In a panic, she could only throw out a wave of force, wanting to use the rebound force to avoid the flame. However, the flame spread extremely quickly. Yang Qing'er had just turned around when she realized that she was completely trapped in a cage formed by flames. The scorching heat roasted her and her entire body was burning. She clenched her teeth and set up a boundary around herself. However, how could her boundary resist the power of a divine beast like Dumpling? Not long later, her boundary began to shake as if it would explode at any time. Chu Liyue quickly rushed over. Yang Qing'er's thoughts flashed and she looked at Song Qingyan with tears in her eyes. "Senior brother Qingyan, save me." Song Qingyan was also secretly puzzled. However, when he saw Yang Qing'er's tortured appearance, he felt pity for her. He hurriedly said to Chu Liyue, who had just rushed over. "Chu Liyue, hurry up and have your magical beast release her. If this goes on, Qing'er won't be able to take it." However, Chu Liyue acted as if she didn't hear him and walked straight to the cage formed by flames. Song Qingyan was anxious. Without thinking, he reached out to pull Chu Liyue. "You didn't listen to what I said." Chu Liyue suddenly turned her head and looked over. Song Qingyan's movements suddenly paused. The young girl in front of him had a cold expression, and her gaze was as sharp as a knife. However, this cold and indifferent gaze made him feel a deep chill from the bottom of his heart. Song Qingyan's hand froze in midair, but he couldn't continue to reach forward. Chu Liyue seemed to be even more difficult to provoke than he thought. While he was in a daze, Chu Liyue had already retracted her warning gaze and looked at Yang Qing'er with a cold expression. "What's with the injury on your wrist?" Yang Qin, and turned her head. I was just accidentally scratched by a tree root. It's nothing. Oh? Chu Liwei asked faintly. Then the smell just now was also accidentally contaminated by it? That's strange. That smell just now seems to be coming from your wound. That was definitely not a normal bloody smell. That smell was exactly the same as the smell she had when she had cut open the roots. This could only mean that Yang Qiner's body had also devoured the power of these roots. But how did she do it? Even Jiang Yuqing and the rest avoided these tree roots, but Yang Qiner was the exact opposite. Yang Qiner clenched her teeth. She wanted to defend herself, but Chu Liwei stared at her as if she could see through everything. At such a time, no matter what she said, it would be like a joke. Seeing that Yang Qiner didn't say anything, Song Qingyan panicked. Qin, what exactly is going on? She was clearly still trapped in the entanglement of those tree roots just now, so why? But Yang Qiner refused to say anything. Chu Liwei pondered for a while and suddenly took a step forward. Lei Laosi followed her worriedly. Chu Liwei turned to look at him and shook his head gently. I'll ask her. Don't worry. Lei Laosi could only stop. But everyone, including him, was staring at Chu Liwei closely. Chu Liwei narrowed her eyes and a guess flashed across her mind. Previously, there was a period of time when Yang Qiner seemed to be quite close to Shangguanwan, and she would even cook porridge for Shangguanwan. Back then, Chu Liwei felt that something was amiss. As the third princess, Shangguanwan had someone to take care of everything in the palace. Since when did she lack someone to cook porridge for her? Shangguanwan said that she got along well with Yang Qiner, so she let her stay in the palace for a few more days. But even a fool wouldn't believe this. What was even stranger was that those days were actually when Yang Qiner testified that Chu Liwei took away the Long Yuan sword and was proven to be false. According to Shangguanwan's temper, not only did she not punish Yang Qiner, but she even kept her by her side. Chu Liwei opened her mouth slightly and said something silently. As her back was facing the crowd, only Yang Qiner saw her words. Shangguanwan used your Yuan meridian, didn't she? Yang Qiner widened her eyes in shock as if she had seen a ghost. They had done this very secretly. How could Chu Liwei have guessed it? Seeing Yang Qiner's reaction, Chu Liwei was instantly certain of her guess. As expected, Shangguanwan had already made a move on Yang Qiner from then on. It was normal for her to want to do this, but why would Yang Qiner agree? Could it be that she was forced by Shangguanwan's power? Chu Liwei still remembered Yang Qiner's expression when she delivered the porridge. It didn't seem like she was forced. Moreover, after such a long time, other than Yang Qiner's body becoming weaker, she didn't seem to be affected much in other aspects. Looking at the strength she displayed just now, she didn't seem weak. Chu Liu's gaze landed on the wound on Yang Qiner's wrist. Suddenly her gaze froze. The strength in Yang Qiner's body actually came from Shangguanwan. Although I don't know what method the two of them used, I can be sure that Yang Qiner's strength would become stronger along with Shangguanwan's strength. Then, Shangguanwan might already know the situation here. Chu Liwei retreated without hesitation. Yang Qiner suddenly looked up and sneered. Want to escape? It's too late. A black rune suddenly flashed across her glabella and disappeared in an instant. The next moment her aura started to surge. Qin Yi's expression changed and he immediately said, "Retreat. She's going to self-destruct." Before he could finish his sentence, he had already rushed towards Chu Liwei. Lei Laosi also sensed that something was amiss and immediately ran. However, the two of them were still one step too late. Boom. A loud explosion was heard. A turbulent and violent energy spread out in all directions. In an instant, flames filled the sky. When Yang Qiner's physical body was destroyed, a black ripple appeared in the air. A strong suction force came from inside. It instantly swallowed Chu Liwei. Her figure disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. "We, Miss Chu!" everyone exclaimed in unison. The moment Yang Qiner self-destructed, Dumpling instantly flew over and blocked in front of Chu Liwei. The next moment, Chu Liwei felt her vision turn black, and she was instantly dragged into darkness by some force. However, just as she was about to retaliate, she suddenly realized that the violent force was isolated outside. A barrier was emitting a lustrous glow, protecting her within it. Chu Liwei blinked. Crystal barrier? Why did it come out by itself before I could even move? Digression. There's only one more chapter left. I feel embarrassed to keep everyone waiting. I'll update it tomorrow at noon. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from LoveWeb. Chapter 738. Just as Chu Luiwei had this question in her heart, she saw a light spot appear in front of her. The surrounding space began to squeeze towards her. Chu Luiwei's expression was slightly restrained as she circulated the force in her body. The next moment, the light in front of her brightened up. Almost at the same time, the crystal barrier suddenly transformed into countless streams of light and silently entered Chu Luiwei's body. Chu Luiwei was shocked. Just as she was about to take a closer look, she suddenly felt that her entire body was pulled out of the narrow and cramped space. Her body staggered and it took her a lot of effort to stand firm. Chu Luiwei quickly glanced around. The surroundings were constantly surging black swamps. The smell of blood and decay was almost suffocating. She could vaguely see many mutilated corpses. There were countless dancing tree roots above. They were of different thicknesses, but all of them were scarlet in color. Under her feet was a cold and hard stone platform. Chu Luiwei's eyes moved slightly. It was almost all swamps below. The existence of this platform was particularly special. If she guessed correctly, this should be, "It's really you." A sarcastic and cold voice came from behind her. Chu Luiwei couldn't be more familiar with this voice. She turned around. A woman was standing in front of her. There was a faint black barrier around her, blurring her face and figure. However, Chu Luiwei could still see at a glance that it was Xianxia. Next to her feet there was something. Chu Luiwei looked over and her pupils shrank slightly. That was her pure gold armor. Without a doubt it was brought by Xianxia. Xianxia had already taken everything that once belonged to her. How could she let go of the pure gold armor? It was just that looking at it now was a little strange. The pure gold armor was extremely noble. In the entire Tianling dynasty, there was probably no other armor that could compare to it. Logically speaking, Xianxia should value this thing very much. Now it was just casually placed on the ground. There seemed to be some messy bloodstains on the ground beside it. Chu Luiwei calmly withdrew his gaze and looked at Xianxia. "You've been peeping in the dark. Did you enjoy watching?" Xianxia asked sarcastically. Chu Luiwei raised his eyebrows slightly. It seemed that Xianxia had already guessed that she was the one who had done those things before. The corners of Chu Luiwei's lips curled into a faint smile. "Third princess, you've misunderstood. I wasn't spying on you. I was just helping everyone find you. Previously, I only took a quick glance and was unable to determine your location. I didn't expect to come here directly this time. If eldest young Master Jiang and the others knew that I had found you, they would be very happy." Xianxia didn't want to listen to a single word Chu Luiwei said, and she wouldn't believe it either. "Are you threatening me?" Xianxuan's expression was cold. It was fine if it was Jiang Yuqing, but the others definitely couldn't know that she was here, let alone what she was doing. "Third princess, why do you say that? I'm just an ordinary person. How can I threaten you?" As Chu Luiwei spoke, he glanced around unintentionally. "Ever since you disappeared, we've been very worried. For this reason, we didn't hesitate to try our best to barge in and even encountered many dangers. Many sect disciples and black cavalry were entangled by those tree roots. Their deaths were really tragic. It's great that you're safe and sound." Xianxuan stared at Chu Luiwei and was silent for a while. Then she suddenly sneered. In the silent and cold space, this sound seemed particularly abrupt and cold. "Chu Luiwei, you don't have to feign civility in front of me. You know better than anyone how you came here. Yang Qin is already dead. What's the point of saying this?" Hearing this, Chu Luiwei's expression faded. "It seems like the third princess has admitted that Yang Qin's injuries and death are related to you? She should have died long ago. It's already her blessing that I let her stay for a few more days." At this point, Xianxuan was very clear that Chu Luiwei had probably guessed many things. Therefore, she directly brought Chu Luiwei over and laid her cards on the table. "But this is the divine beast you just contracted?" Xianxuan looked at Dumpling, who was on Chu Luiwei's shoulder. Her eyes were filled with jealousy and resentment. If it wasn't for Chu Luiwei, this divine beast would have been hers. "What a pity," Xianxuan muttered softly, her face filled with dense killing intent. It was a pity that this divine beast had already been contracted and couldn't recognize a new master. So, she could only kill it together with her. It wasn't easy for a divine beast to appear in the world. In the end, not only could she not take it for herself, she even had to take its life. Shang Wanwan's hatred for Chu Luiyue deepened. Dumpling seemed to be a little agitated. Chu Luiyue patted its head gently and comforted it in her heart. When she discovered that Yang Qin might be colluding with Shang Wanwan, she had already expected this situation. Since Shang Wanwan dared to say these words so brazenly, it was obvious that she didn't intend to let her leave alive. But Shang Wanwan wanted her life. It wasn't that easy. I remember that you also have a Daijing Yuan meridian and your grade isn't low? Shang Wanwan sized up Chu Luiyue, her eyes filled with undisguised greed and excitement. Now she only needed a little bit of strength to completely restore her Yuan meridian. Maybe Chu Luiyue could complete it. After all, Chu Luiyue's strength had always been much stronger than the realm she displayed. Plus, she had a divine beast. Chu Luiyue smiled, but there was no smile in her eyes. It seems that the third princess is very interested in my Yuan meridian? Shang Wanwan couldn't be bothered to pretend anymore. It's your honor to be able to serve me. Shang Wanwan raised her hand and waved it forward. A dark blue origin power flew out in an instant. It went straight for Chu Luiyue. At the same time, countless tree roots flew over from all directions. Whoosh! Dumpling's body flashed and she instantly transformed into her true form. She flapped her huge wings and scarlet flames surged out. All the tree roots were easily brushed away and were tainted by the scarlet flames. In an instant the flames soared into the sky. The surrounding darkness was dispelled. It was as bright as day. A violent wind blew. It was oppressive. Shang Wanwan clenched her fists tightly, and her heart was filled with hatred. Even though there was a barrier in front of her, she could still feel the terrifying power of the attacks. The power of a divine beast was so shocking. No wonder Chu Luiyue was so bold. With this red-tailed phoenix, she didn't even need to do anything herself. The huge figure entrenched itself above Chu Luiyue's head, carefully protecting her under its wings. The surrounding flames shone brightly on Chu Luiyue's face and body. Shang Wanwan gritted her teeth and glared at her. Chu Luiyue's expression was indifferent. When she met Shang Wanwan's resentful and jealous gaze, she suddenly smiled. Shang Wanwan's heart suddenly skipped a beat. That smile, those eyes, that expression, it was very similar to the person who was wrapped in flames in the Imperial Ancestral Hall that day. Shang Wanwan unconsciously took half a step back, extremely shocked. Who exactly are you? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 739. Everything was like the scene from that day. It was like a nightmare. Shang Wanwan's body was trembling and her face was pale. Chu Luiyue smiled until her eyes turned into crescents. Me? I'm Chu Luiyue. How can third princess not recognize me? Her tone was light as if she was teasing her. Shang Wanwan took a deep breath and kept telling herself in her heart that this was Chu Luiyue. This was Chu Luiyue. But the firelight reflected on her beautiful face, making it half bright and half dark. It was very similar to Shang Guanyu. Chu Luiyue took a step forward and seemed a little worried. Third princess, what's wrong? Don't come over. Don't come over. Shang Wanwan screamed. At the same time she hurriedly stepped back and accidentally fell to the ground. Chu Luiyue stopped and stood there, quietly looking at Shang Wanwan with a smile. For a moment she seemed to be high and mighty. Shang Wanwan looked at Chu Luiyue, her heart beating wildly. Chu Luiyue stood there and looked down at her as if she had done it countless times. Shang Wanwan's face burned. It was too embarrassing for her to be in such a sorry state. Chu Luiyue was Chu Luiyue. Who else could she be? No one knew better than her that Shang Guanyu was dead. He was completely and utterly dead. There was no chance of her coming back to life. An illusion. These were all illusions. Shang Wanwan forced herself to stand up. The way she looked at Chu Luiyue gradually became fierce. Even if Chu Luiyue didn't discover all this today and didn't barge in, she definitely wouldn't let her stay for long. Her face alone was enough to kill her 10,000 times. Yes. Chu Luiyue. You're Chu Luiyue. Shang Wanwan said hatefully. No one knew who she was repeating it to. Chu Luiyue looked at her with interest. Shang Wanwan's reaction was really interesting. Chu Luiwei originally thought that Shangguan was full of hatred for her and would be very happy after killing her back then. But no. It wasn't that she wasn't guilty and afraid. Chu Luiwei was suddenly curious. If Shangguan knew that she was really Shangguan Yu, what would her expression be? No matter who you are, you deserve to die. Shangguan's heart was filled with anger and fear. Even though she kept convincing herself in her heart that this person was Chu Luiwei. However, countless scenes from the past appeared in the past. The intense emotions caused her facial features to distort. A black aura was faintly discernible between her brows, and there was a faint green light in her eyes. From afar she looked like a malicious spirit. Chu Luiwei frowned slightly. Just now she was a little puzzled. When did Shangguan's force turn green? She didn't expect that there would be flames of the same color dancing in her eyes now. Looked very strange. Could it be that she had used a special method to devour other people's yuan meridians? Shangguan attacked again. This time she used almost all of her strength. The berserk power carried a terrifying pressure as it came crashing down. The space around Chu Luiwei was instantly compressed. It was as if a mountain was pressing down on her body, and even the flow of the force in her body slowed down. At this moment, Shangguan's strength had definitely reached rank 8. Although Chu Luiwei had already broken through to rank 5, there was still a huge gap between her and Shangguan. Dumpling let out a clear cry. Screech. A ball of red flames instantly condensed into a barrier, protecting Chu Luiwei in the middle. At the same time, it flapped its wings and several feathers flew out. They were like sharp swords that pierced toward Shangguan. Thud thud thud. The feathers that emitted a gorgeous glow and carried a powerful aura, fiercely hitting the black barrier in front of Shangguan. The black barrier trembled. Shangguan gritted her teeth. It would be difficult to devour Chu Luiwei's power in a short period of time. That crimson gold pill phoenix by her side was seriously too powerful. The most important thing for her now was to recover her yuan meridian. She asked in her heart, "Senior, do you have a way to deal with that divine beast?" After a moment, a hoarse voice lazily sounded. "I can help you stall that red gold phoenix for half an hour. Whether you can kill Chu Luiwei or not will depend on your ability." "Thank you, Senior." Shangguan was overjoyed. As long as there was no interference from that divine beast, wouldn't it be a piece of cake to deal with Chu Luiwei? Not to mention half an hour she could take Chu Luiwei's life with a single move. Then a black rune appeared between Shangguan's brows. Then it floated out. A cold aura spread out from it. It quietly passed through the barrier and drew an arc in the air. Chu Luiwei looked at it and suddenly felt a chill in her heart. The force that forcefully dragged her over just now seemed to be exactly the same as the aura of this rune. Could it be that this was the mysterious existence that was secretly helping Shangguan? A sense of uneasiness suddenly welled up in her heart. This rune was definitely more difficult to deal with than Shangguan. Just as this thought flashed through her mind, Chu Luiwei saw that the rune had already flown towards Dumpling. Several black lines floated out from the surface of the sword. Those lines were even thinner than a strand of hair. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't be able to detect it at all. Tuanzi's body burned with red flames in an instant. Her pair of dazzling crystal-like eyes were also shining brightly. However, when the flames touched the black lines, they actually didn't burn. The black lines passed through the flames and quickly outlined a huge net. Dumpling. Chu Luiwei's heart tightened and immediately wanted Dumpling to retreat. However, it was already too late. That huge net directly trapped Dumpling. At the same time, Shangguan rushed over. She threw a simple and direct punch. Die. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 740. Just as Chu Luiwei and Shangguan were in an intense battle, the people left behind were also very anxious. Yang Qin-er's sudden self-destruction caught everyone off guard. By the time they reacted, Chu Luiwei's figure had already disappeared. The only thing left on the battlefield was the violent aftermath of the explosion. Lei Laosi stared at the empty space, feeling angry and regretful as his chest heaved up and down. Her Highness was right in front of me, yet I actually couldn't protect her well. She could only watch helplessly as she was dragged into the void. 2 years ago we weren't by Her Highness's side, which gave those people a chance. But now, The blood in Lei Laoxi's body surged as he raised his hand, wanting to slap himself. Laoxi. Qin Yi, who was standing beside him, suddenly spoke. Lei Laoxi's raised hand instantly stopped in midair. He looked up and saw his big brother looking at him with a calm expression and a hint of warning in his eyes. If we overreact now, we'll definitely be suspected by others. Jiang Yuqing, Mu Qinghe, and the rest are still watching from behind. Qin Yi's silent warning made Lei Laoxi come to his senses. He clenched his teeth and put his hand back, but his fists were tightly clenched, and the veins on his forehead were faintly visible. What happened just now? Jiang Yuqing hurriedly walked over with a cold and stern expression. Qin Yi turned around with a calm expression. Yang Qin self-destructed and tore open the empty space. The mastermind also forcefully dragged her away. Jiang Yuqing knitted his brows tightly. This means that there's indeed something wrong with Yang Qin. Who exactly is the mastermind behind this? Qin Yi shook his head and looked at Song Qingyan. Song Qingyan instantly looked like he was scalded. Why are you looking at me? What do you mean by that gaze? Yang Qin is from the Purple Shao Sword sect, and she's very close to you, young Master Song. Now that something happened to her, don't you have anything to say? Qin Yi's tone was very calm, but every single word was extremely sharp. It directly raised Song Qingyan's suspicion to the highest level. The surrounding people all looked over suspiciously. That's right. Everyone had clearly seen how Song Qingyan had protected Yang Qin with all his might just now. Did he not know that there was something wrong with Yang Qin? Song Qingyan said angrily. What can I say? I don't know anything. Initially he wanted to defend Yang Qin, but in this situation, any words would be useless. Yang Qin had chosen to self-destruct. If this wasn't a guilty conscience, then what was? Coupled with her strange wound from before, even Song Qingyan was well aware that she must be hiding something. The person was already dead, and the most important thing now was to clear himself of suspicion. Oh, you were so close to her. Do you really not know anything about what she said or did? Qin Yi asked. Song Qingyan felt extremely aggrieved. I really don't know. Even if I ask you 100 times, you still don't know. How long had Yang Qin been in the Purple Shao Sword sect? He was also attracted to her because she was beautiful and gentle, which was why he got close to her. Who would have thought that something like this would happen? Qingyan, I believe that this matter has nothing to do with you, but any clues are very important now. If there's anything wrong with her, feel free to tell me if you know anything. The person who said this was Jiang Yuqing. Song Qingyan looked at him in disbelief. This means Jiang Yuqing is clearly suspicious of me. Just as he was about to refute, he saw Jiang Yuqing's serious expression, as if he was very concerned about this matter. Well, he was clearly concerned about Tu Luiwei. Song Qingyan had some understanding of Jiang Yuqing. Seeing his reaction, he could basically guess what he was thinking and could not help but be secretly shocked. Mu Qinghe, who was at the side, glanced at Jiang Yuqing without batting an eyelid. Jiang Yuqing looked gentle and polite, but he was actually cold-hearted and ruthless. The person he valued the most was himself. Shangguan had been missing for so long, but he had never been so anxious. Chu Liwei just disappeared, yet he already couldn't hold it in. Mu Qinghe looked down and suppressed the guess in her heart. I'm afraid that Jiang Yuqing himself hasn't noticed this, right? I really don't know anything. If I knew, why would I waste so much effort to save her just now? Why would I speak up for her? Song Qingyan defended himself. Nothing could be seen from Jiang Yuqing's expression, but his eyes were deep and obscure. It seems like I really can't get anything out of Song Qingyan. He looked at Qin Yi again. Young Master Qin, do you have a way to find her current location? The moment he said that, he heard footsteps behind him. I know where she is. The cold and indifferent voice of a youth sounded. The surroundings fell silent. Qin Yi looked at the golden-haired youth standing in front of him. His expression was cold and his lips were slightly pursed. Only his eyes were filled with determination. Qin Yi narrowed his eyes. Chang Wanzhou continued. I'll bring you to save her. Qin Yi gave a half-smile. Why me? Because you're the strongest. You can help her. Chang Wanzhou stared at him fixedly. He didn't say the remaining half of his sentence. It's also because Chu Liwei trusts Qin Yi. He could clearly see that Chu Liwei trusted Qin Yi and Lei Laoxi a lot. Even though he didn't know why he trusted her. Qin paused and nodded. Jiang Yuqing immediately asked, "Why? Then where exactly is she?" The moment he asked that, Jiang Yuqing realized that he was too anxious. His expression changed and he added, "If we go together, we'll go together. The chances of success will be higher." Mu Hongyu and Yi Ranran had already followed them and seemed to want to go together. Chang Wanzhou glanced at Jiang Yuqing and slowly swept his gaze across the crowd. "She's very far from here. If too many people go, it will only drag down the speed." Jiang Yuqing's face was a little ugly. Mu Hongyu and Yi Ranran originally wanted to go, but they hesitated when they heard that. "Then you guys go first. It's more important to save Lu Yu first. Don't worry about us." Even though Mu Hongyu was also very worried, she still said that. She had a faint yuan body and could teleport, so it was actually more convenient for her compared to the others. However, she wasn't sure if her current skills were enough. It wouldn't be good if she became everyone's burden when she went there. Yi Ranran also nodded seriously. "Big brother Qin, you guys go first." Since they already said that, the others couldn't say anything else. Qin Yi raised his hand and gently waved it, tearing open space. Then he stepped in. Chang Wanzhou followed closely behind. Lei Laosi was about to follow when Qin Yi glanced at him and lightly shook his head. "Protect them well." After that, the two of them completely disappeared. Jiang Yuqing knitted his brows tightly and fell into deep thought. If Chu Liwei was really taken away by Shangguanwan just now, I actually know the location. Digression. Continue at 6 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 741. Jiang Yuqing was very conflicted, as if there were two of him arguing in his mind. On one hand, if Shangguanwan really did all this, she definitely wouldn't leave Chu Liwei alive. Even if Qin Yi and the rest went over, they might not be able to save Chu Liwei. On the other hand, Chu Liwei probably already knew something. If she made it out of here alive, she would undoubtedly be a huge hidden danger to Shangguanwan. She might even implicate me. After all, I'm in the same boat as Shangguanwan. If Chu Liwei exposed what Shangguanwan did, our marriage would definitely be ruined. Shangguanwan, together with him, would suffer a disastrous fall in status. There were already many people in Xiling City who hated him. Once he lost his power, it went without saying what awaited him. After thinking for a long time, Jiang Yuqing's gaze gradually turned cold. At this point, Chu Liwei and Shangguanwan didn't know what was happening in another place. Shangguanwan threw a punch. This punch was extremely simple and clean. There weren't any fancy moves and only an extremely domineering force. A ghostly green fist shadow flew out, silently tearing through space. It drew a perfect arc in midair. Finally, it went straight for Chu Liui's face. The space in front of Chu Liwei was harshly squeezed. Under this valiant suppression, Chu Liwei felt as if something heavy was pressing down on every part of her body, and it was extremely painful and unbearable. Her entire body seemed to have been frozen, and even moving became extremely difficult. A Stage 8 warrior's all-out attack. Even Chu Liwei wouldn't be able to face it head-on. Chu Liui's eyes flashed with coldness as she watched the rapidly approaching fist shadows. Buzz. The water droplet in her dantian suddenly started spinning. Boundless energy surged out and instantly filled her limbs and bones. With the support of this power, the pressure on Chu Liwei was greatly reduced. With a slight movement of her feet, she disappeared from the spot. The shadow of the fist missed. Shangguanwan narrowed her eyes and sneered. "You do have some skills." Chu Liui's aura was clearly much stronger than before. From the looks of it, she indeed had a trump card that could not be underestimated. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to dodge her full-force attack so easily. No wonder Chu Liuei was able to obtain first place in the previous competitions. Shangguanwan's heart was filled with disdain. "You want to rely on this little bit of strength to escape today? I'm afraid you're too naive." No matter how many tricks he had, they were all jokes in the face of absolute power. An idea popped up in Shangguanwan's mind, and the fist shadow suddenly changed its direction and continued charging toward Chu Liuei. However, at this moment, a silver ray of light flew out from Chu Liui's hand. Shangguanwan narrowed her eyes and took a closer look. Only then did she realize that it was the dagger that Chu Liuei had used before. She raised the corner of her mouth in a mocking smile. "You want to rely on this thing to break this consort's attack? What a joke." As the saying goes, an inch longer is an inch stronger. A handy yuan instrument could often increase a cultivator's combat power. However, Chu Liwei seemed to have always used this dagger. No matter how sharp and useful this dagger was, it was still easily inferior to swords, spears, swords, and halberds. Therefore, from Shangguan Wan's point of view, Chu Liu's insistence on using this dagger was just asking for trouble. However, in the next second, her complacent and disdainful smile froze on her face. This was because Chu Liu's dagger had harshly split her fist shadow in half. It was extremely fast. The fist shadow's power did not seem to be of any use as it was torn apart just like that. The condensed power instantly dissipated. Chu Liuwei had already retreated and set up a barrier in front of him, blocking the violent energy outside. Shangguan Wan was both shocked and furious. The dagger in Chu Liuwei's hand, there was clearly something wrong with it. Perhaps it's also a rare treasure. No wonder she never let it go. If it were any other time, Shangguan Wan might have some interest in that dagger. However, at this moment, her heart was filled with thoughts of killing Chu Liuwei as soon as possible. Since her first attack had failed, she quickly made another move. This time she was much more serious. Her figure flashed and she rushed in front of Chu Liuwei. Although Chu Liuwei was fast, he was not as fast as Shangguan Wan, who was moving at full speed. Moreover, under such circumstances she did not intend to continue hiding. Shangguan Wan's hands formed a seal in front of her. The dark green force surged out one after another and formed a palm print in front of Shangguan Wan. This palm print was about the size of her hand and emitted a sparkling glow. The surrounding power began to gather towards this palm print. Chu Liuwei narrowed his eyes. She was too familiar with this move that Shangguan Wan used. This was because this was a palm technique that only the disciples of the Tianling dynasty's royal family could cultivate. Lingxiao palm. Most importantly, although this was an earth rank martial skill, the power that it could unleash was enough to reach the heaven rank. Shangguan Wan's hands paused and then she changed her posture slightly. The surrounding energy began to surge towards the palm print even more violently. Chu Liuwei sneered in his heart. The Lingxiao palm was divided into 3 levels. The first level was something that all the disciples of the royal family could cultivate, but the second level required the cultivator's strength to reach the 7th rank before they were qualified to continue cultivating. This requirement might be a little high for ordinary people. But for the disciples of the Tianling royal family, it was not difficult. However, not everyone was able to successfully cultivate the second level. Because the Lingxiao palm was obscure and difficult to understand, many people were unable to enter the second level. As for the third level, it could only be continued after reaching the 8th rank. Although the current Shangguan Wan had barely reached the 8th rank, her yuan meridian was damaged, and it was impossible for her to continue studying it. Therefore, she only displayed the strength of the second level. However, in her opinion, this was enough to deal with Chu Liuwei. To be able to make me use the second level of the Lingxiao palm, you can be considered to have died a worthy death. Chu Liuwei's expression was cold, and a mocking smile flashed across the corner of her mouth. Speaking of which, Shangguan Wan could not learn the second level no matter how hard she tried. She had to secretly beg her and learn from her. At that time, Shangguan Wan finally succeeded in cultivating it after her patient guidance. She was overjoyed and tactfully said that she hoped to give her father a surprise. How could Shangguan Yu not know what she meant back then? However, she did not mind and took the initiative to say that she would not reveal this matter. To outsiders, she would only say that Shangguan Wan had comprehended it herself. After the news spread, many people praised Shangguan Wan for her intelligence. Even her father's attitude towards Shangguan Wan was much gentler. He said that he could not tell when she was young, but she had become smarter as she grew older. Chu Liu's hand moved slightly in her sleeve. Since she was the one who taught her back then, it was time for her to return it. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 742. Chu Liuwei held his breath and concentrated. The force in his body quickly surged toward his right hand. A starlight suddenly lit up on his fingertip. Soon, the starlight separated and floated to the finger beside him. In the blink of an eye, all 3 fingers on Chu Liu's right hand had lit up. But it did not stop. The 4th starlight appeared shakily. Although it looked a little weaker than the previous 3, it still appeared. The surrounding energy surged as if it wanted to rush over. However, Chu Liwei waved his other hand gently and repelled all the dirty energy. Shang Guanwan might not mind. She might even be happy to devour the surrounding energy. She could not dislike. It was too dirty. Therefore, Chu Liwei simply continued to mobilize the energy in his body. The water droplets spun quickly. The 5 patterns fluctuated, and the majestic force continuously surged toward Chu Liwei. Sensing that Chu Liwei had isolated the surrounding energy, but his aura was still rising rapidly, Shang Guanwan's expression changed slightly. How did he do it? Could it be that Chu Liwei had other trump cards? This momentary distraction caused the energy that Shang Guanwan was gathering to become chaotic for a moment. She quickly focused and stabilized it with great difficulty. Seeing that the green palm print had finally returned to normal, Shang Guanwan closed her eyes. He felt somewhat sullen. It was true that she had learned the second level, but a large part of it was actually copied from Shang Guanyu. Because she did not fully comprehend it, she had to follow every step that Shang Guanyu had taught her when she used this move. If there were any mistakes in the process, all her efforts would be for naught. On one hand, Shang Guanwan was proud that she could cultivate to the second level. On the other hand, she was trapped because she could not use it freely. Every time she used the move, she would be greatly restricted. Moreover, every time she used it, she would inevitably think of Shang Guanyu. For this reason, Shang Guanwan would not use this move under normal circumstances. However, he needed to end the battle quickly, so this was the best choice. Lines glowing faintly appeared on the palm. From afar they looked like palm prints. The finer the palm print was, the stronger the power it contained. Different cultivators had different insights and understandings of this move, so the palm lines they drew were also different. However, Shang Guanwan learned it from Shang Guanyu, so her palm prints were very similar to hers. However, it was much simpler than Shang Guanyu's. When Shang Guanwan finished the last stroke, the 5th star quietly appeared on Chu Liue's fingertips. Chu Liue looked up and her gaze lingered on Shang Guanwan's palm print for a moment. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly. After such a long time, Shang Guanwan's cultivation of the Lingxiao palm did not improve at all. Well, her Yuan meridian was destroyed, so she could not even compare to ordinary cultivators. How could she still comprehend the Lingxiao palm? It must have been hard for her to memorize these little by little, not daring to forget them. Chu Liwei raised her hand gently. 5 stars shone brightly. She had already memorized the stupefying god art by heart. Therefore, after breaking through to the 5th stage, she naturally comprehended the stupefying god art. Now, because the force in her body was much more abundant, she could finally light up all 5 stars. You think you can compete with my palm technique? Shang Guanwan sneered. She cultivated the martial technique of the Tianling dynasty, which had been passed down for thousands of years. How could Chu Liwei compare to it? Chu Liwei did not seem to hear her and gently pushed her palm forward. A silver palm print floated in the air. The light was bright but not dazzling. However, the surrounding space started to collapse silently, and a circle of black appeared. The palm print floated there quietly, but it contained a pressure that could not be underestimated. Shang Guanwan's expression changed slightly. Chu Liue's move seemed to be an earth stage martial technique. She frowned and scolded herself for thinking too much. Even if it was an earth stage martial technique, Chu Liue was so much weaker than her. She could not compete with her. With a thought, she pushed the palm print out. Lingxiao palm. The dark green palm print flew forward noiselessly. At the same time, Chu Liue's silver palm print also started to move. She actually chose to fight head-on with Shang Guanwan. You overestimate yourself. Shang Guanwan sneered disdainfully. The 2 palm prints quickly approached each other. Before they even touched, the power of both sides began to fight crazily. The space between the 2 shattered one after another. Crack. Even a crack had appeared on the stone platform below. A dark green light flashed through the crack. Shang Guanwan did not notice this. Chu Liue seemed to have sensed something and suddenly stared at the crack. Something was wrong. It was an intuition. Even if there seemed to be no problem now, she still felt a faint sense of uneasiness in her heart. Suddenly, there was a fluctuation in front of her. Chu Liue quickly looked up. After a fierce battle, the power of the Jingxin palm was gradually devoured, and it began to slowly retreat. On the other hand, although Shang Guanwan's Lingxiao palm consumed a lot of power, because her level was much higher than Chu Liue's, the power contained in her palm was also more abundant. At a glance, the Lingxiao palm was gradually gaining the upper hand. Sheng Wanwan spurred on. Go. The Ling Xiao palm was quickly approaching. It seemed that she intended to completely devour the Jingshan palm. At this moment the Jingshan palm suddenly exploded. Countless starlight scattered. Sheng Wanwan thought that she had won this time. Just as a smug smile appeared on her face, she saw that the starlight did not dissipate. Instead it burst out with a dazzling light. For a moment the light was dazzling. The dazzling light illuminated the place as if it was daytime. Sizzle. When the light surrounded the Ling Xiao palm, there was a burst of ear-piercing sound at the edge. Sounded like something was being burned crazily. The palm print began to shrink at a speed visible to the naked eye. An unpleasant smell quickly spread out. Sheng Wanwan was shocked and could not believe what she saw. How was this possible? Chu Luiyue was only a stage 5 warrior. How could her palm technique have such terrifying power? But at this moment Chu Luiyue suddenly moved. Her two hands formed a strange gesture in front of her. Sheng Wanwan took a look and felt that the gesture was somewhat familiar, but she could not remember where she had seen it before. Then Chu Luiyue raised her hand and gently drew in the air. The starlight in the sky surged. Soon it formed a pattern. Sheng Wanwan stared at it closely, afraid that she would miss something. Chu Luiyue's movements were very slow, so Sheng Wanwan could see it very clearly. She even unconsciously sketched it in her mind. Slowly she finally realized that something was wrong. The pattern drawn by Chu Luiyue was gradually overlapping with the palm print pattern of the second level of the Ling Xiao palm. Digression. Shu, don't ask. If you ask, it means that the 6th watch is at 6:30. If you ask again, you will be procrastinating. Cough. Slipping away. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 743. The patterns drawn by Chu Luiyue were actually completely different from the palm prints. However, for some reason, they were inexplicably compatible and gradually intertwined with each other. Sheng Wanwan had a bad feeling and immediately looked away, trying to clear her mind of the mess. She had painstakingly memorized the palm prints, so there must not be any deviation. Even so, it did not seem to be of much use. Just now she had been looking at it for quite a while, and she had been looking at it very seriously. She had clearly memorized all of Chu Luiyue's movements, including the veined patterns. And now those patterns were deeply engraved in her mind, and she could not get rid of them even if she wanted to. Gradually, Sheng Wanwan realized that her memory of the second level of the Ling Xiao palm was starting to become chaotic. The two diagrams slowly intersected and very soon it became a mess. This situation was too strange. Sheng Wanwan had cultivated for many years, but she had never encountered such a situation before. She had painstakingly learned the Ling Xiao palm back then, and she had put in a lot of effort to learn it. In order to win a word of praise from her imperial father, and to make everyone look at her in a new light, she did not hesitate to secretly ask Shang Guanyu for help. Because Shang Guanyu's understanding of the Ling Xiao palm was more thorough and detailed than hers, the Ling Xiao palm that the two of them executed was different. Even if she had learned it according to Shang Guanyu's palm prints, if an ordinary person did not look carefully, they would not notice any problems. Moreover, Shang Guanwan had always been very careful and rarely used this move in front of others. This was originally a move that she had been thinking about for a long time, and it was almost engraved in her bones and blood. It was not that she had never fought with others before, but it had never been like this. The more anxious Shang Guanwan was, the more confused her mind became. Even the green palm print was affected, and the patterns on the palm started to become chaotic. This chaos caused the power of the Ling Xiao palm to decrease greatly. Chu Luiyue glanced at Shang Guanwan indifferently. Shang Guanwan had already turned her gaze away, trying not to look at them. She held her head with both hands, looking conflicted and pained. As if she had sensed Chu Luiyue's gaze, she suddenly raised her head and screamed. Chu Luiyue, what kind of trick are you playing? Chu Luiyue chuckled, but his hands didn't stop moving. The pattern in front of him seemed casual, but it had a strong regularity to it. Ordinary people wouldn't feel much when they saw this pattern. At most, they would feel dizzy after looking at it for a long time. But Shang Guanwan was different. As long as she saw it, she would never forget it. Because this pattern was the third level of the Ling Xiao palm. Back then, after Chu Luiyue broke through to the 8th rank, he began to cultivate the last level of the Ling Xiao palm. Her comprehension ability was extremely high, and it did not take her long to completely comprehend it. But no one knew about it except herself. Even his father, the emperor, knew nothing about this. At that time she just did it as a matter of course and did not think of announcing it to show off. After all, she was already the most noble existence. Naturally, she did not need to use such a method to prove her excellence like Shangguan. And now this had given her a lot of convenience. Because he was worried about exposing his identity, Chu Luiwei had not used any of the martial arts skills he knew since his rebirth. If not for Shangguan's move today, Chu Luiwei would not have thought of using this move to deal with her. The cultivation of the Ling Xiao palm was divided into 3 levels. Each level was a summary and transcendence of the previous level, and the 3rd level was even more so. Shangguan had cultivated the 2nd level, and the palm print had already left a deep imprint in her heart. Now, as long as she saw the patterns on the 3rd level, she would involuntarily start to cultivate according to this level. But she didn't even comprehend the 2nd level, let alone the 3rd level. After looking at it, the only result was that this part of Shangguan's cultivation was completely disintegrated. Shangguan herself must have realized that something was wrong, which was why she was so flustered and exasperated. Unfortunately, it was too late. Chu Luiwei did not say a word and only continued to outline the remaining patterns. When Shangguan raised her head and accidentally saw it, she only felt as if someone had taken a knife and forcefully carved this pattern in her mind. Sensing that the impression in her mind was becoming more and more chaotic, Shangguan finally couldn't take it anymore and screamed. Then she rushed toward Chu Luiwei with scarlet eyes. "Slut! Trying to mystify in front of this consort, you're courting death." Chu Luiwei's eyes narrowed dangerously. He hooked his finger lightly and added the last pattern. Finally he stopped. Shangguan was getting closer and closer. She was about to charge over. Chu Luiwei pulled with both hands. That huge pattern instantly floated over. Shangguan only saw a flash in front of her eyes. That strange pattern appeared in front of her again. Chu Luiwei spoke softly as if he was guiding her, but also as if he was ruling. "Let's see how your Ling Xiao palm is like." As soon as he finished speaking, Shangguan's mind exploded. Ling Xiao palm. Crack. In an instant it was as if something had suddenly broken. As if out of control, the 2 patterns in her mind were completely mixed together. The 2nd layer of palm lines, which was deeply imprinted like a brand, instantly shattered and dissipated. Shangguan's body trembled and she violently spat out a mouthful of blood. She clearly felt as if something was rapidly flowing out of her body. Ling Xiao palm, Ling Xiao palm. Shangguan raised her eyes with difficulty and looked at the shattered palm print, only to see that the palm lines on it had completely shattered. Chu Luiwei's eyes were cold and sharp. He formed a whip with his force and viciously lashed it out. Smack. That ghostly green palm print collapsed along with it. What she could give Shangguan back then she could take away today. Ling Xiao palm? She didn't deserve it. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 744. Shangguan let out a shrill cry as she hugged her head in extreme pain. She frantically wanted to keep all the memories of the Ling Xiao palm in her mind. However, everything was like sand in her hands. The more she tried to salvage it, the more futile her efforts were. Previously her mind was in a mess, but now it gradually became blank. No, I learned the Ling Xiao palm with much difficulty. How can I forget it just like that? Once I fall to the 2nd stage today, it will be harder than ascending to heaven if I want to cultivate it again in the future. Shangguan panicked as she panted heavily. One of her hands unconsciously tugged at her hair, causing strands of hair to fall. However, Shangguan could no longer care about it. The strange pattern that Chu Luiwei drew forcefully destroyed the Ling Xiao palm in her mind. It was as if it was effortless. When the last pattern completely disappeared, Shangguan's actions finally slowed down. "It's gone. It's really gone. I really fell to the 2nd stage of the Ling Xiao palm. No matter how hard I tried to recall, there was nothing in my mind. When I thought about it for a long time I would even feel a sharp pain." Shangguan weakly took 2 steps back. Her legs turned to jelly and she almost fell to the ground. Chu Luiwei gently exhaled and his back was drenched in sweat. Actually, with her current stage 5 warrior abilities, it was very difficult for her to execute the 3rd stage of the Ling Xiao palm. Even just drawing the pattern had used up a lot of her force. Without the support of the water droplet in her dantian, she definitely wouldn't have been able to do this. This attack seemed very simple, but it had actually used up more than half of her body's strength. However, the good thing was that the effect was not bad. It seems like your so-called Ling Xiao palm isn't very good. Chu Liyue spoke softly with a smile on his lips. When Shang Guanwan heard this voice, it was as if she suddenly realized something as she suddenly looked up. Her eyes were bloodshot and her face was filled with resentment. Tu Liyue. Shang Guanwan called out Chu Liyue's name word by word. Every word seemed to be squeezed out from between her teeth. His tone was filled with deep resentment, as if he wanted nothing more than to drink his blood and eat his flesh. He had thought that he could easily get rid of Chu Liyue, but he had not expected to suffer a double loss. There was something wrong with Chu Liyue. The move she used just now was a despicable move that he didn't know where she learned it from. Shang Guanwan couldn't figure it out, but she didn't want to continue investigating. There was only one thought in her mind right now: to kill Chu Liyue. If Chu Liyue was not dealt with today, there would be no end of trouble in the future. Although she didn't like Chu Liyue before, she didn't take Chu Liyue seriously at all. But today Shang Guanwan finally realized that Chu Liyue was much harder to deal with than she had expected. Anger and resentment surged in her heart, almost bursting out of Shang Guanwan's chest. Her intense emotions made her crazy, and her facial features were slightly distorted. In the depths of her eyes, a dark green fire could be vaguely seen. It looked like a ferocious ghost. At this point, a clear cry was heard. Shang Guanwan was shocked. She turned around and saw that the crimson gold phoenix had already broken free from the black net and was angrily rushing out. It was heading straight for her. The red fire surged and the entire space instantly turned into a sea of fire. The crimson gold phoenix's crystal-like eyes flashed with extremely cold, murderous intent. Shang Guanwan's entire body turned cold. It was as if she was instantly surrounded by the Grim Reaper. Danger! She hurriedly got up and ran away without thinking. But the moment she turned around, a fire suddenly attacked her. Poof! Shang Guanwan was shocked. She hurriedly dodged and accidentally fell to the ground. Lowering her head, she saw that her skirt was already stained with the red fire. She hurriedly extinguished the fire. However, Dumpling had the intention to kill this time. How could she let her off so easily? The surrounding flames burned crazily and from all directions, they rushed toward Shang Guanwan to kill her. In a moment of desperation, Shang Guanwan hurriedly set up a barrier around her. At the same time, she ran towards the crimson gold armor that was thrown on the ground. Even if the crimson gold armor had not officially recognized her as its owner, when she wore it, it would still be able to provide some defense. Shang Guanwan was forced to the point that she had no other choice. In a state of panic, she could only think of these methods to deal with it. But just as she was about to reach the crimson gold armor, a terrifying aura suddenly attacked from the side. Shang Guanwan was stunned and a trace of fear surged in her heart. Suddenly, a black rune appeared in the void, blocking in front of Shang Guanwan. Boom! The two forces collided fiercely. Chu Liyue's pupils constricted. The fireball formed by the red flames was actually completely blocked by the black rune. With the help of the black rune, Shang Guanwan successfully put on the crimson gold armor again. Touching the cold and hard armor, Shang Guanwan's heart calmed down. Chu Liyue stared at the black rune and narrowed his eyes. This was Shang Guanwan's true backing. Shang Guanwan was protected by the barrier and finally had time to breathe. She said in her heart, "Thank you, Senior." However, the other party only replied coldly, "Useless thing." Shang Guanwan was reprimanded, but she didn't dare to refute. She didn't even dare to show a trace of dissatisfaction. She didn't expect that she would be forced to such a state by a mere Chu Liyue. Senior is right. It's all this junior's fault for underestimating the enemy. Even if you use your full strength, I'm afraid the situation won't be any better than now, right? That hoarse voice had a hint of mockery. Don't forget, you're now a trash who hasn't even recovered your Yuan Meridian. Shang Guanwan might be able to gain the upper hand in the first few moves, but as time passed she wouldn't be able to hold on. In the end, wasn't she still being beaten up by Chu Liyue? Shang Guanwan bit her lips angrily, and a trace of blood seeped out of her lips. However, her lips and teeth were already full of blood. This was not worth mentioning at all. In the end, I still have to do it personally. That voice said coldly. Shang Guanwan was shocked and felt complicated. Senior, buzz. A strange buzz could be heard all of a sudden. Then the black rune slowly flew to Shang Guanwan's glabella. This time the edge of the black rune seemed to be burning with flames and curled slightly. Before Shang Guanwan could speak, there was a subtle change in her expression. Her expression quickly faded away, leaving only indifference and coldness. Her eyes also became even more scarlet. Her entire body was filled with a monstrous murderous aura. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. Dumpling. Hearing her call, Dumpling, who had intended to fight head-on, quickly flew back. The next moment Shang Guanwan raised her hand and tapped lightly in the air. Boom. A violent gale spread out in all directions. The space around Chu Liyue quickly collapsed. Then her body flew forward uncontrollably. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 745. Shang Guanwan's hand went straight for Chu Liyue's slender neck. It was as if with a slight twist she could break this slender and fair neck and completely take away Chu Liyue's life. Chu Liyue's entire body was enveloped by a terrifying pressure and she couldn't move. A murderous intent flashed across Dumpling's eyes, and she immediately chased after her. Shang Guanwan raised her eyes and looked at Dumpling expressionlessly. The huge net that she had just broken free from was once again blocking in front of her. Moreover, this net had clearly been repaired and it was even more dense and difficult to deal with than before. Dumpling's speed slowed down. However, in this moment of slowing down, the distance between Chu Liyue and Shang Guanwan had rapidly shortened. Shang Guanwan's meticulously trimmed nails were about to scratch Chu Liyue's creamy skin. Suddenly, a vigorous aura erupted from Chu Liyue's body. Shang Guanwan's wooden expression finally cracked. She retreated in shock, but her eyes were still fixed on Chu Liyue. No wonder you're so arrogant. So you still have such a trump card. That aura just now was clearly above a 9th stage warrior. Chu Liyue's body actually hid such a strong warrior's strength. Although Shang Guanwan's voice didn't change, her tone was different from before, as if she had changed into a different person. Without her control and threat, Chu Liyue fell from the sky. When her feet stepped on the ground again, she let out a long breath in her heart and said gratefully, "Thank you, Taizu." She really didn't expect that Taizu would take the initiative to attack in that situation just now. Taizu didn't say anything, but he firmly protected Chu Liyue. Shang Guanwan looked at Chu Liyue suspiciously. Chu Liyue also looked up at the other side. This time both sides fell into a short silence and stalemate. The air seemed to have condensed and it was suffocating. On the surface this was a duel between Shang Guanwan and Chu Liyue, but in reality it was no longer. Suddenly there was a fluctuation in the air. Shang Guanwan immediately turned her head to look. Her expression was cold. This scene must not be seen by anyone. Just as she was about to move, she suddenly heard a sound that was neither loud nor soft. It seemed like something had broken. Shang Guanwan looked down. A crack suddenly appeared in the middle of the stone platform. Chu Liyue also saw this scene. But in reality she knew that this crack had been there for a long time. That crack was slowly but surely spreading in all directions, expanding at a speed visible to the naked eye. The uneasiness in Chu Liyue's heart grew stronger. She quickly summoned Dumpling. Just as a hand touched Dumpling's neck, she saw a faint green light rush out from the crack. Then the entire stone platform was filled with cracks. It began to collapse. At the same time, countless tree roots fell from above. They swept toward the two of them. Chu Liyue quickly jumped onto Dumpling's back. However, at that moment the entire stone platform collapsed. The faint green light lit up the entire space. Then a terrifying suction force came from below. Shang Guanwan's feet were empty and she fell straight down. She was about to be devoured. However, at that moment she suddenly grabbed a tree root and shook it to Chu Liyue's side. She grabbed Chu Liyue's ankle. Chu Liyue wanted to defend, but she suddenly realized that she could not use the force around her. It was the same for Taizu's force. In that moment Shang Guanwan grabbed Chu Liyue. Then she pulled fiercely. Everything happened too quickly. Before Chu Liyue could react, she was already forcefully pulled down. Chu Liyue raised her leg and kicked Shang Guanwan fiercely. Shang Guanwan's face immediately turned to the side from the kick. A A few of her teeth also fell out. In her panic, she only had time to put on the pure gold sacred armor and forgot to put on the helmet. However, she quickly reacted. As long as Chu Luiwei did not hurt her head or face, she could easily take down Chu Luiwei. Enveloped by the faint green light, both of them could not use their force. They could only rely on their physical strength. Shangguanwan's eyes were fierce. She grabbed Chu Luiwei's ankle tightly and pushed hard. Chu Luiwei fell. Dumpling flapped her wings and scratched Shangguanwan's face fiercely. Her sharp claws instantly scratched Shangguanwan's face. The few scratches were shocking. They were so deep that the bones could be seen. Shangguanwan screamed and was about to think of a way to retaliate when Dumpling quickly chased after Chu Luiwei. Saving master is more important. As for Shangguanwan, when we meet again I will definitely return the favor. Dumpling's figure followed closely behind Chu Luiwei and disappeared into the dense faint green light below. Shangguanwan hugged the tree root tightly, afraid that she would accidentally fall down. Who knows what's down there? At this moment the air was torn apart. Two silhouettes walked out one after the other. It was Qin Yi and Chang Wanzhou. The black rune on Shangguanwan's glabella instantly disappeared. The dazed expression on her face gradually faded, and she returned to her previous look filled with anger and resentment. She shuddered. Just now, was I being controlled by that person just now? She's right here, Chang Wanzhou was speaking when he suddenly saw the scene in front of him. Shock flashed across his eyes and his voice stopped abruptly. Qin Yi reacted faster than him. When he saw the stage that was almost completely collapsing and the strange faint green light in the middle, he immediately realized that something was amiss. He quickened his steps and rushed over. In the end, he saw Shangguanwan struggling to climb up. Other than her, there was no one else around. Chu Luiwei isn't here. Qin Yi's gaze finally landed on the abyss below. Other than the blinding light, he couldn't see anything. He was just standing at the edge, but he felt like he was about to be swallowed. Where is she? Chang Wanzhou also followed over and stared at Shangguanwan as he questioned her coldly. Shangguanwan recognized the two of them and felt a chill in her heart. However, she still forced herself to say, "It's good that you're here. It's good that you're here. Hurry and save me." Chang Wanzhou's voice was even colder. "I'm asking you, where is she?" Shangguanwan could only pretend that she didn't know. "What are you talking about? Who is she? I'm the only one here from start to end. Hurry and pull me up. She can't hold on for too long just by relying on her own strength. Someone must bring her out from the outside." Murderous intent appeared on Chang Wanzhou's face. "I can clearly feel Chu Luiwei's aura here. She must have been here before." Looking at Shangguanwan's haggard appearance, she clearly just went through an intense battle. Plang! Chang Wanzhou suddenly pulled out his sword. A sparrow blue flame flashed past. He held the cloud sky copper sword tightly in his hands. Then he slashed at the tree root that Shangguanwan was hugging. Since Shangguanwan isn't willing to tell the truth, then I'll just kill her. Digression. It's better to be together at 6 p.m. for the rest of the time. My 5-year-old computer is barely hanging on, and the exhaust fan is so hot that you can fry an egg on it. I brought it to be repaired. Mending for another 3 years. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from AI Web. Chapter 746. A piercing sword light flashed across. Shangguanwan's heart skipped a beat. She watched as the cloud sky copper sword was about to cut that tree root. But just as it was about to touch it, Qin Yi suddenly pressed down on Chang Wanzhou's wrist. His actions were very light, as if he was just touching it lightly. However, Chang Wanzhou's actions instantly stopped. Anger was written all over Chang Wanzhou's beautiful face as he gripped the sword hilt tightly with both hands and increased his strength as he tried to resist. However, Qin Yi was simply too strong, and he suppressed Chang Wanzhou completely without batting an eyelid. The moment he put his hand down, Chang Wanzhou couldn't move at all. Realizing that he was indeed not Qin Yi's match, Chang Wanzhou looked up angrily. "I don't believe that Qin Yi can't tell what's going on here. Why did he stop me? It's not enough even if Shangguanwan dies 10,000 times." Qin Yi's expression had already regained its calmness, and his long and narrow eyes were filled with darkness. "We haven't made things clear yet, so don't jump to conclusions." Then he looked at Shangguanwan with a gentle expression. "We'll save you first. Shang Guanwan was elated as she nodded profusely. After Qin Yi said that, he actually waved his sleeves and threw out a rope that wrapped around Shang Guanwan's waist. With a light flick of his wrist, Shang Guanwan was pulled up. After leaving the area enveloped by the dark green light, Shang Guanwan instantly felt as if she had crawled up from hell. She turned around to take a look with lingering fear, and her entire body was drenched in cold sweat. If I didn't grab that tree root just now and wasn't careful, I would have been the one falling down. Coincidentally, there was another ripple in the air at this moment. A figure walked out from within. Shang Guanwan turned around and was instantly shocked. The person who came was actually Jiang Yuqing. "Yuqing!" exclaimed Shang Guanwan as she hurriedly ran over and pounced into his arms. You are finally here." Jiang Yuqing didn't notice it for a moment and was thrown into his arms. He subconsciously put his arms around Shang Guanwan's waist. Shang Guanwan cried in his arms. "I was so scared. I almost died for a long time. Yuqing, did you specially come here to look for me?" Jiang Yuqing knew where she was. Since he had appeared now, he must be here for her. Shang Guanwan had been through those things before, so she had accumulated a lot of emotions. At this time, seeing Jiang Yuqing, she finally couldn't hold back and burst out. Fear, anxiety. In this short period of time, she had experienced several life and death situations in succession, and her mental state had been extremely tense. Now he could finally relax a little. The front of Jiang Yuqing's shirt was soon soaked by Shang Guanwan's tears. Her arms were tightly wrapped around him and her body was still trembling slightly. It was obvious that she was extremely scared. Even Jiang Yuqing rarely saw her like this. As he softly comforted her, he gently patted her shoulders. "It's fine. Aren't I here now? Don't worry." When Chang Wanzhou saw Jiang Yuqing, who suddenly appeared, he pressed his lips together and glanced at Qin Yi. It turns out that he already sensed someone coming. Furthermore, this person is Jiang Yuqing. It's not hard to imagine what the outcome would be if Jiang Yuqing came and saw me planning to kill Shang Guanwan. But even so, what about Tu Liyue? Chang Wanzhou looked at the deep abyss in the middle and held the cloud sky copper sword in his hands tightly. Jiang Yuqing hugged Shang Guanwan and comforted her, but his gaze was darting around as if he was looking for someone. In between his brows, there was a tinge of undetectable worry. Qin Yi saw it clearly and couldn't help but laugh in his heart as mockery flashed across his eyes. He lightly said, "Jiang Yuqing, you came quickly. Eldest young master Jiang, you came so quickly. We just arrived, yet you followed right behind us." Jiang Yuqing's expression froze. "My cultivation level isn't as high as Qin Yi's and I'm also injured. Logically speaking, it's impossible for me to arrive so quickly. The most important thing is that I didn't come with the two of them, yet I still came here. Without a proper reason, it definitely can't be justified. Not long after you left, I received Wanu's call for help, so I chased her here." Jiang Yuqing roughly explained. He didn't intend to tangle with the two of them. No matter whether they believed it or not, they had no right to question him. After all, he and Shang Guanwan were engaged and they both had respectable statuses. It was very normal for them to have some trump cards. Then he seemed to be reprimanding and heartache as he said, Why did you send the news so late? We almost went crazy looking for you." Shang Guanwan knew what she should do at this time. Besides, she also wanted to hide it a little. She didn't say anything and just hugged Jiang Yuqing even tighter as she sobbed. Qin Yi looked at the two of them nonchalantly as if he didn't have any intention of asking. "I see." Jiang Yuqing secretly heaved a sigh of relief in his heart as he scrutinized the surroundings in detail. He then asked, Are you the only one here?" Shang Guanwan laid in his arms so everyone couldn't see her expression. Shang Guanwan nodded hesitantly and her voice was muffled. "This means, we've already dealt with Tu Liyue?" Jiang Yuqing was stunned. He felt lost and even a little hurt. It was as if someone was holding a needle and stabbing it into his heart, causing a fine and continuous pain. Actually, he had been very conflicted in his heart. On one hand, Tu Liyue had probably guessed what Shang Guanwan was doing. From all aspects, he had to kill her. Otherwise, there would be endless trouble in the future. However, on the other hand, he had been very uneasy and worried. Once he thought of the scene of Tu Liyue being killed by Shang Guanwan, he felt very uncomfortable. Originally, he didn't intend to come. However, by the time he reacted, he was already here. Somehow, it was as if he was being driven by something. Jiang Yuqing didn't dare to think too much, as if there was a taboo in his heart. Once touched, it would be a complete collapse. Shang Guanwan naturally didn't know anything about this. She just thought that Jiang Yuqing really came because he was worried about her. After all, he knew why I came to Dahuang Swamp this time. Thinking of this, Shang Guanwan felt hatred in her heart. I still have a bit of my Yuan meridian to recover. If it wasn't for Chu Luyue, Jiang Yuqing looked down. Judging from this chaotic scene, a huge battle must have happened just now. He furrowed his brows slightly. Weird. If Shang Guanwan wanted to kill Chu Luyue, it should have been very easy. Why did it cause such a huge commotion? Could it be because of that red-tailed phoenix? Since eldest young Master Jiang is here, take the third princess and leave first. Qin Yi spoke. I'll go and see what's down there. Jiang Yuqing followed his line of sight and immediately understood what Qin Yi meant. He actually wants to jump down into that strange abyss that's emitting a dark green glow? What do you want to do? When Shang Guanwan heard this, she instantly looked up and asked agitatedly. Since I killed Chu Luyue, I definitely won't allow anyone to save him. Jiang Yuqing patted her shoulder and persuaded her gently and patiently. Young Master Qin should have just. Jiang Yuqing's voice stopped abruptly as he pushed Shang Guanwan away as if he had seen a ghost. That face, which used to be considered pretty, was now covered in blood and flesh, looking as terrifying as a malicious ghost. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from AI. Net. Chapter 747. Shang Guanwan was suddenly pushed away by Jiang Yuqing. Her expression changed and anger rose from her heart. Just as she was about to speak, she happened to meet Jiang Yuqing's eyes. There was also a trace of disgust that was hidden very deeply, but she could still see it. Shang Guanwan was suddenly stunned, and then belatedly remembered that her face had been scratched by the red gold phoenix. Jiang Yuqing was disdaining her face? Shang Guanwan only felt cold all over, and all the blood in her body rushed to her head. An indescribable anger exploded in her heart. Jiang Yuqing saw the change in her eyes and realized that his push just now was inappropriate, so he quickly took a step forward. Your face, how did you get this injury? His words were sincere and his expression was anxious, as if he was very worried. But the disgust on his face just now had been deeply engraved in Shang Guanwan's mind. There was no woman in the world who didn't care about her face. Especially a princess from the imperial family like Shang Guanwan, who valued her appearance even more. From her hair to her toes, there was nothing that wasn't exquisite. From her hairpin to her boots, there was nothing that wasn't exquisite. Her status was noble and she was the center of attention. Her every word and action had to be paid special attention. Not to mention her face? With a disfigured face, who knew what kind of joke she would be if she went out? Shang Guanwan had been on the verge of death before, and it wasn't easy for her to survive. She didn't have time to think about her face at all. Now Jiang Yuqing's reaction finally reminded her of this matter, and it caused a great shock to her. Shang Guanwan sneered. You didn't ask me if it hurt but asked me how I got this injury first? Jiang Yuqing secretly said that he had miscalculated. Normally he definitely wouldn't have made such a low-level mistake. But just now he didn't take any precautions and most of his attention wasn't on Shang Guanwan, so his reaction was a little more direct. As a result, it turned out like this. He knew Shang Guanwan too well. He was afraid that she would hold a grudge against him for a long time. Jiang Yuqing suddenly felt a headache coming on. He had experienced enough things before and his body was barely holding on. He had no extra energy to deal with Shang Guanwan. I don't mean anything else. I'm just too worried about you, Shang Guanwan sneered with a mocking expression. Her expression made Jiang Yuqing feel as if a fishbone was stuck in his throat, and he didn't bother to say the rest of his explanation and comforting words. In the past, Shang Guanwan was very gentle and considerate most of the time. This was also one of the important reasons why he liked her. Although he also knew that Shang Guanwan was not as innocent and harmless as she looked, he did not mind. With such a background, it was normal for her to be scheming. However, in the past 2 years she had become sharper and more sensitive. She would often hold on to a small matter and cause a huge commotion. Jiang Yuqing had long been tired and his patience was wearing thin day by day. He let out a long sigh in his heart, tried his best to suppress his impatience and persuaded, these are all wounds. These are all superficial wounds. After we go back and apply Bingji ointment on them for a while, they will naturally heal. Previously, Yuji also accidentally hurt her face, but it healed quickly. You can't see anything. Shangguan didn't think much of it and listened to his words as if she was listening to a joke. Of course, she knew that the wounds on her face could be healed. However, Jiang Yuqing's push just now. I will never forget it. Qin Yi was too lazy to care about the two of them and walked straight over. Chang Wanzhou immediately followed. Qin Yi glanced at him. To stay there. Even I find it dangerous. Isn't Chang Wanzhou courting death by coming over? Chang Wanzhou moved. After hesitating for a while, he still listened to Qin Yi. I know my limits. If Qin Yi went over, he might be able to bring Chu Liwei back, but if I go, I might just become a burden. Shangguan glanced over from the corner of her eye and saw Qin Yi walking to the edge. She immediately said, "You can't go down." Qin Yi acted like he didn't hear her. Shangguan anxiously said, "It's dangerous. It's dangerous. It's very dangerous down there. You'll just be courting death if you go." Jiang Yuqing also looked over and knitted his brows. Seems like Chu Liwei fell down there. That aura is very dangerous and Chu Liwei should have gone down for a while already. I'm afraid, rumble. A loud boom suddenly came from the abyss. Qin Yi's expression changed. The dark green light glowed brightly. A strong force surged out from within. The surrounding black swamp started to surge crazily. Qin Yi originally wanted to rush in directly, but he was stopped by the crazy force outside. At that moment the world spun. The few of them disappeared on the spot. At the same time, the same scene was playing out in the underground of the mystic forest. Bang! The dull sound of a heavy object hitting the ground was heard. After that sound, it didn't stop. Accompanying it were all sorts of painful cries. This sound made Qin Yi abruptly open his eyes. He suddenly came out of the dark underground and the surrounding light was so piercing that it hurt his eyes. However, he still bore with the pain and quickly looked around. We're still in the mystic forest. Judging from the messy and broken trees around us, it shouldn't be far from where we were previously. He looked up and indeed saw that mother tree in the distance. Chang Wanzhou wasn't far behind him to the right and he didn't seem to be severely injured. Jiang Yuqing and Shangguan were in front of him. There was a distance between the two of them. When he looked further away, there were people all around them. Most of them were from the Black Cavalry and some were disciples from other clans. Qin Yi knitted his brows. Seems like everyone has been chased out. Whose power was that just now? It's actually so strong. Even I can't resist it at all. Big brother. This was Lei Laoxi's voice. Qin Yi turned around and indeed saw Lei Laoxi running over. When he reached Qin Yi, Lei Laoxi anxiously asked, "Big brother her." Qin Yi cut him off. "Hello, third princess." Lei Laoxi hurriedly kept quiet, but his eyes were still filled with anxiousness and worry. Where's Chu Liwei? I don't know why, but everyone was chased out by a strong force just now. He immediately saw Big Brother here and rushed over excitedly, but he realized that Chu Liwei wasn't here. We've already found Shangguan and Jiang Yuqing, so why is Her Highness missing? Qin Yi's expression dulled. We haven't found her yet. You haven't found her? How can this be? Lei Laoxi suddenly thought of something and his voice stopped abruptly as shock flashed across his eyes. He then swiftly scanned his surroundings and carefully scanned everyone's faces. No. It's still not. Her Highness is actually not here. Unwilling to give up, he lifted his feet and walked to the other side. At this moment, Shangguan's voice was heard. Everyone should have come out by now. Could it be that those who haven't come out have already? Digression. The fifth update was around 6:30 p.m. She silently jotted it down in her notebook. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 748. Shangguan didn't finish her sentence. That was because Lei Laoxi looked over. This time he didn't scold her with a hoarse voice and only glanced at Shangguan. However, that glance was extremely cold. He was originally very capable, and with this cold and fierce glance, he was even more intimidating. Shangguan subconsciously shuddered, and a tinge of fear grew in her heart. She subconsciously swallowed the rest of her words. However, the hands in her sleeves were already tightly clenched. She looked down and hid the anger in her eyes. When I leave this place, I must find a chance to settle this Lei Laosi. I still remember the scene of Lei Laosi fighting with me previously. I'll settle the old and new grudges together then. Lei Laosi sneered, and his expression looked extremely ferocious and scary. I can see through Shangguanwan's thoughts. If I wasn't in a hurry to find Her Highness, I definitely wouldn't let her off so easily. Lei Laosi retracted his gaze and walked forward with big strides. This time Qini didn't stop him. Lei Laosi searched very carefully. Even though he remembered Chu Liuyue's figure, he still seriously looked at every face that he passed by. Some had their backs facing him and some were lying on the floor. He walked over patiently and searched them one by one. After confirming that it wasn't her, he then continued forward. Shangguanwan looked at Lei Laosi's back view and knitted her brows tightly. She turned and saw Mu Qinghe. Vice Admiral Mu. Mu Qinghe walked over. Elder Qiushi also came along with her. He quickly caught up to Mu Qinghe and shouted excitedly, "Mu Qinghe, you're the one who gave me the permission to do so." He said excitedly, "Your Highness. We finally found you. You don't know how worried we were for you for such a long time." Mu Qinghe glanced at him and didn't say anything. She then bowed to Shangguanwan and Jiang Yuqing respectively. "Your Highness, eldest young master." Elder Qiushi wiped his tears with his sleeve. "Your Highness, we are relieved to see that you are safe and sound. We didn't look for you in vain." Shangguanwan's attention was finally attracted by his words. She frowned and looked puzzled. "Elder Qiushi, what do you mean by that? You guys have been looking for me all this time?" Elder Qiushi immediately recounted what had happened. Of course, he emphasized his concern for Shangguanwan and emphasized that it was under his urging that everyone finally decided to come down to look for her. Because these people were not bound by the roots the second time they came down, Shangguanwan was not very clear about this. "So that's how it is. Thank you for your hard work." Shangguanwan gritted her teeth and said word by word. If it weren't for these people, she wouldn't have been delayed by Chu Liyue. Elder Qiushi was talking smugly when he suddenly noticed that Shangguanwan's mood seemed to be a bit off, so he kept quiet. His gaze quickly swept across Shangguanwan's face. I wonder what exactly she went through for her to end up like this. Even though Elder Qiushi's gaze was extremely light and his movements were extremely small, Shangguanwan still noticed it. The resentment in her heart deepened, but she couldn't flare up in front of so many people right now. She hurriedly took out a scarf and covered her face. Although her forehead and eyebrows were exposed and the ghastly wounds could still be seen, it still looked much better than her entire face that was torn apart. She looked at Mu Qinghe. Vice Admiral Mu, Lei Laosi and Chu Liyue seemed to have a good relationship. "Do you know what happened?" Mu Qinghe shook her head and said hesitantly, "Lei Laosi and Lei Laosi have been guarding the nine-eyed beasts for a long time. Lei Laosi and the other two have always been in charge of guarding the nine-colored heavenly pheasant. Now that the nine-colored heavenly pheasant has broken through and become a red-tailed phoenix, it has made an agreement with Chu Liyue. It's probably related to this matter." It was fine if they didn't mention the red-tailed phoenix, but the moment they mentioned Shangguanwan, she was filled with anger. The mythical beast that originally belonged to her was gone, and it even scratched her face. Now that Chu Liyue was dead, that mythical beast definitely wouldn't be able to live either. "This place is very dangerous. We must leave as soon as possible." Jiang Yuqing walked over and said in a low voice. Shangguanwan wanted to refute, but she saw Jiang Yuqing looking at a certain spot with a solemn expression. She couldn't help but follow his line of sight, and her breathing suddenly stopped. She saw that the mother tree was withering at a speed visible to the naked eye. A gust of wind blew past and countless leaves turned from green to yellow before falling down. What was even more terrifying was that after those leaves fell to the ground, they actually silently transformed into puddles of blood. Very quickly, a blood-colored puddle was piled up on the ground. And it was still spreading to the surroundings at a terrifying speed. Everywhere it passed by, everything was silently corroded. Such a bloody and bizarre scene caused everyone to be dumbstruck. Everyone hurriedly got up and kept retreating. "We can't stay in this place anymore. Let's go. Let's go." The crowd was in chaos. Vaguely, someone seemed to be sucking something. Lu Yu, where are you?" Mu Hongyu Yi ran and the rest were looking for Chu Liyue. There were also many black cavalry soldiers who were looking for Chu Liyue's whereabouts. Miss Chu. Miss Chu. You guys search here, we'll go over there. Okay. Almost half of the people in the crowd were looking for Chu Luiyue. Sheng Guanwan was stunned by this scene. What was going on? What happened when she wasn't around? Just as she was about to ask, she suddenly heard a cracking sound. She lowered her head and saw that there was a crack on the pure gold armor. Sheng Guanwan widened her eyes in shock. However, soon after, the crack began to spread rapidly. Bang! The pure gold armor dissipated. It turned into powder. At the same time, Chu Luiyue was falling into the abyss. Her surroundings were strange and colorful. Her vision was chaotic and she couldn't see anything. In the blur, a figure chased after her. It was Dumpling. It flew to Chu Luiyue's body and lifted her up. Dumpling flapped its wings, wanting to leave with Chu Luiyue. However, there seemed to be an invisible suction force below, dragging them all the way down. Violent turbulence spread out in all directions. The lower they went, the more terrifying it was. Countless small wounds instantly appeared on Chu Luiyue's body. However, at this moment, her body was suddenly enveloped by a layer of faint golden light. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 749. The golden light enveloped Chu Luiyue's body, isolating the surrounding terrifying airflow. Chu Luiyue's face was filled with astonishment. This glazed barrier? She could feel that this was indeed the power of the glazed barrier. But why did it turn from silver to gold? Furthermore, the glazed barrier was usually a spherical barrier. Chu Luiyue had never seen a barrier that formed a layer of protection. Rather than calling it a barrier, it was better to call it armor. Yes, it was an armor. With such a tight fit, other than the fact that it wasn't a real object, it wasn't much different from an armor. Just as this thought flashed through Chu Luiyue's mind, she saw the golden light on her arms suddenly condense. At first she didn't notice it, but when she saw the strange patterns on it, she finally realized that something was wrong. Why did these patterns look so familiar? Chu Luiyue stared at it for a while, then looked at her body. Indeed, she found that the golden light on other parts of her body was also condensing. From top to bottom. At her chest, a silver light suddenly flashed. Chu Luiyue lowered her head to take a look, and her eyelids twitched violently. Because in front of her chest, there was actually a heart protection mirror. Chu Luiyue blinked her eyes and a trace of disbelief surged in her heart. This is... As if to confirm her guess, the surrounding golden light condensed even faster. Not long after, it completely formed the appearance of an armor. This armor wasn't brand new and there were many marks on it, as if it had experienced many intense battles. The faint golden color, warm and simple, thick and heavy. It perfectly fit Chu Luiyue's body, as if it was specially made for her, outlining the perfect lines of her body. Chu Luiyue was stunned for a long time. Looking at the armor that suddenly appeared on her body, she held her breath. There seemed to be blood flowing through her eardrums, and it was beating violently like her heart. Chu Luiyue's breathing became hurried, and her entire body seemed to be ignited. Her cheeks were boiling, but her eyes were as bright as the most resplendent night sky. Pure gold sacred armor. This was really the pure gold sacred armor. Originally, she thought that it had been taken away by Sheng Guanwan, but she didn't expect it to appear here, on her body. Stars flashed in front of her eyes. Chu Luiyue looked up. Countless golden streams of light converged and finally condensed into a helmet. It was the helmet of the pure gold sacred armor. Chu Luiyue's heart almost jumped out of her chest. She slowly stretched her hand and held the helmet in her hand. It was cool to the touch, but it also had a trace of boiling heat. An extremely bright light from the top of the helmet's helmet. Immediately, with the light with the pure gold sacred armor's body armor, the armor pure gold sacred armor, instantly like the wind with the wind, everything as it was as if a layer of dust had finally been wiped off, revealing its original color and luster. The pure armor recognize its Chu Luiyue never expected the pure gold armor to return to her side in such a manner. In an instant, countless thoughts flashed through her mind. The reason why the pure gold sacred armor didn't recognize Sheng Guanwan as its new owner was most likely because her soul still existed. But how did it come about? Chu Liwei recalled the situation just now and was suddenly stunned. Could it be? Is this really related to the glazed barrier? At the thought of this, she tried to summon the glazed barrier. The pure gold sacred armor was overflowing with light and colors, and it gradually became transparent. It was like a layer of transparent and colorless soft armor that perfectly covered Chu Liue's body. Only when one looked carefully could one see the faint engravings on it. This was indeed the glazed barrier. But this was also the pure gold sacred armor. Seemed like, after encountering the pure gold sacred armor, the glazed barrier had changed. These two things had invisibly merged into one, and in the end, it appeared before her eyes in this way. Chu Liue's heart trembled. A scene suddenly appeared in her mind. The day before she left country Yao Chen's imperial capital, she accompanied Rong Xiu to play chess and informed him that she was about to leave and head to the Tianling dynasty. Rong Xiu said that the glazed barrier he gave her previously was damaged, so he would give her a new one. At that time, Chu Liyue didn't pay much attention to it, because the second glazed barrier was exactly the same as the first one. From the outside there was no difference at all. It wasn't until she arrived at Xiling, participated in the Wanzheng competition, and entered the Tianling god realm that she finally realized that this glazed barrier seemed to be a little different. Its defensive power was extraordinary. At that time, although Chu Liyue was curious, she didn't think too much about it because the situation was urgent. Later on, he gradually forgot about this matter. If the glazed barrier hadn't taken the initiative to appear and protect her this time, she might not have remembered the existence of this little thing. Now that she thought about it, she had a clue. What kind of yuan instrument could easily block the sword aura of the long yuan sword? Although the glazed barrier was divided into several grades, this kind of power was simply too shocking. Even the best glazed barrier she had seen in her previous life might not be able to do this. Rong Xiu. Chu Liyue mumbled softly with a complicated expression. A bold thought suddenly appeared in her mind. Rong Xiu. Does he know something? Thousands of miles away. In the room, two people sat opposite each other. Pa 36 respected Elder Ming placed his last piece. On the chessboard, the black and white pieces went through an intense battle before the victor was finally decided. 36 respected Elder Ming's eyes lit up. Hee. I've finally won against you, Your Highness. Rong Xiu put the chess piece back into the chess jar and looked up with a faint smile. Respected Elder's power is superb. I admit defeat. His words were said casually as if he had already expected this outcome. 36 respected Elder Ming was originally stroking his beard with a smile. When he saw Rong Xiu's expression, his heart skipped a beat. He accidentally pulled out 3 strands of his silver-white beard. Did Your Highness purposely let me win? Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. No, I didn't. I thought too much and lost this round. Don't give me that. Do you think I can't tell whether you went easy on me or not? 36 respected Elder Ming glared at him angrily. When he played chess with Rong Xiu, he had almost never won. After studying for so long, he did not expect it to end up like this. His joyful mood was instantly reduced. However, after thinking about it, this outcome was normal. 36 respected Elder Ming was relieved. You started learning chess at the age of 5. When you were 6, you had few opponents. After you were 7, even I found it hard to win against you. After losing for so many years, do you think I'm a sore loser? I'm already used to it, okay? At the start, Rong Xiu went easy on him very obviously. Later on, he gradually hit it very well. If Your Highness wants to, you can definitely play all the chess players in the world in your hands. 36 respected Elder Ming let out a long sigh. Rong Xiu suddenly chuckled. His thin lips curled up slightly as he leaned against the back of the chair and said lazily, not necessarily. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 750. His voice was deep and mellow. With a chuckle, he sounded even more unrestrained. 36 respected Elder Ming lifted his eyelids and took a glance at him. Rong Xiu was smiling. There was a hint of a smile in between his eyebrows, like the beginning of spring. However, that pair of deep eyes wasn't looking at the chessboard. They were silent with hidden ripples as though he had sunk into deep thought. 36 respected Elder Ming was a little surprised. Rong Xiu was actually a very prideful person. In terms of chess skills, he could be said to be the best of the best. 36 respected Elder Ming felt that his standard was already not bad. However, in front of Xiao, he couldn't even find out his bottom line. At the very least, among the people that he knew, no one could win against Xiao in this aspect. No, it should be said that there was no one who could compete with him. Your Highness, do you mean that there is someone who can compete with you? Yes. Xiao tilted his body slightly and propped up his elbows. No one knew what he thought of, but he suddenly laughed. I have lost quite a number of times. 36 respected Elder Ming was even more shocked. From what he said, he didn't lose because he went easy. He really lost. There is actually such a person in this world? It wasn't an easy thing to win against Xiao. Of course there is. Xiao's smile deepened. However, there was a tinge of extremely faint gentleness in his eyes. However, if we were to meet again now, my chances of winning would be higher. Knock knock. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. Come in. Xiao said indifferently. Yanqing walked in and bowed to the two of them one after another before saying, Your Highness, 36 respected Elder Ming. The people from the Ming tribe are here. They want to see 36 respected Elder Ming. The Ming tribe was one of the tribes. It was also the clan that 36 respected Elder Ming came from. Because of 36 respected Elder Ming, the Ming tribe's status wasn't low. However, 36 respected Elder Ming's expression changed. He immediately became impatient. Why are they here again? Didn't I say that this old man is very busy and told them not to disturb this old man's business? Yanqing lowered her head and said respectfully, Respected Elder, after you came out of seclusion this time they sent people over. But at that time, you were busy discussing important matters with the other revered elders, so you didn't get to meet him. Now that they've heard that you've finally returned from your travels, they've specially rushed over. These bastards definitely didn't have any good intentions. It's fine if I don't meet him. Go back and tell them that this old man is in seclusion. I don't have time to see them recently. Every time they asked to see him, nothing good ever came out of it. Who knew why they were here this time? One had to know that not long ago, Xiao had personally led an army to wipe out a division. Weren't they just looking for trouble by coming here at such a sensitive time? Missing. They were all gone. Yanqing hesitated for a moment and said, Respected Elder, the news of you and His Highness playing chess for a few days has already spread outside. They also know about it. Otherwise, how would those people dare to block him here? 36 respected Elder Ming was extremely frustrated. Seeing his reaction, Yanqing knew that it was best for her not to say anything else. But she had to say those words. In the end, she could only bite the bullet and say, They also said that they'll continue to wait for you here. Whenever you're done with your work, you can just meet them. 36 respected Elder Ming was so angry that he blew his beard and glared. In the end, he could only leave. From the looks of it, those people from the Ming division couldn't avoid being reprimanded again. A long time after he left, Xiao sat up straight. He moved his wrist and a crystal barrier appeared on the chessboard. Sunlight shone in from the window and shone on the crystal-clear crystal barrier. It was bright and moving. Then there was the second one. Then there was the third one. Xiao took out a total of 6 crystal barriers and placed them in a row on the chessboard. He looked at the crystal barriers in front of him and laughed softly. I didn't expect it to be so fast. I've refined so many for nothing. He refined these crystal barriers according to different levels and wanted to give them to her gradually. But when he knew that she was planning to go to the Tianling dynasty, he was worried and gave her that one directly. What he didn't expect was that she would actually. Xiao's thin lips curled up. Actually, this was within reason. After all, it was originally hers. It caused these glass worlds to have no place to be used. Yanqing stood at the side and quickly raised his eyes to take a look. He saw that his master had waved his sleeves and those crystal barriers were silently turned into dust. A light breeze blew and those flying dust instantly flew up. Then it dissipated. She quickly lowered her head. Master had spent a lot of effort to refine these crystal barriers. Now they were all destroyed. Could it be that Miss Lu Yu sighed? Keep all these. Xiao said lightly. Yes. Yanqing hurriedly went forward. Looking at the faint marks left on the chessboard, she faintly felt her heart ache. These were all top-grade crystal barriers made with the best materials and personally refined by her master. If they were released, who knew how many people would be willing to go bankrupt just to get one? What a pity, what a pity. She had followed her master for so many years, but the number of times she saw her master personally refining yuan instruments was few and far between. And most of them were for Miss Lu Yu. Her actions were clean and nimble. She quickly cleaned up the chessboard and retreated. When she reached the door, Yanqing paused for a moment and asked again. Your Highness, the people from the Ming division, don't you plan to meet them? Those people from the Ming division had always been restless. No one knew why they were here this time. Although 36 respected elder Ming was suppressing them, they were his clan after all. He was often restrained because of this. Rong Xiu laughed lazily and said casually, they asked to meet 36 respected elder Ming. After killing the chicken to warn the monkey, the other divisions were much more well-behaved. Even if they wanted to cause trouble, they had to reconsider their own abilities. Moreover, with 36 respected elder Ming around, they couldn't cause trouble. Yanqing lowered his head and replied, yes, I will take my leave. After speaking, he respectfully retreated. After closing the door, the room fell into silence again. After a while, Rong Xiu looked in front of him. Come out. A huge white figure flashed past. It was Xianxia. She walked in front of Rong Xiu and lay on the ground. Only a pair of icy blue eyes stared at Rong Xiu. She looked very lovable, which was a rare sight. God knows how much she had been holding it in during this period of time. She missed her so much. Rong Xiu glanced at her indifferently. You seem to think that this move will work on anyone? Xianxia's expression froze. The paw that was about to act coquettishly froze in mid-air. She didn't know how to continue. After being stunned for a while, she angrily retracted her paw. She angrily tilted her head to the side and let out a whimper. She wanted a warm and soft hug. Rong Xiu's gaze turned cold. Dream on. Xianxia, Rong Xiu continued. Oh right, I forgot to tell you. He has found little nine. Xianxia suddenly raised her head and opened her eyes wide. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 751. On Rong Xiu's elegant face, there was a faint smile on his lips as if he was talking about a small matter that had nothing to do with him. However, Xianxia was very clear that his expression, what he said, must be true. Many complicated emotions flashed through Xianxia's eyes, and it let out a low whimper. It first got up and seemed to want to go out, but after taking 2 steps, it came back and lay down beside Rong Xiu's feet. Of course it was happy. After all, its relationship with little Nine had always been very deep. But it felt a little lost in its heart. Thinking that little Nine could be with it every day after it went back, Xianxia was very envious. Rong Xiu glanced at it from the corner of his eyes. Seeing that it was tired, he said casually, also, it has already broken through to become a divine beast. Xianxia raised its head and laid down lazily again. So what if it was a divine beast? It was as if it wasn't. Rong Xiu smiled and finally added the last fatal sentence. Its level is higher than yours. Xianxia was immediately provoked and looked at Rong Xiu in disbelief. Looking at Rong Xiu's silent smile, Xianxia immediately understood that what he said was true. Xianxia was very hurt. It turned around and jumped out of the window. Cultivate. I can't lose. The soldiers in charge of guarding outside heard the sound and looked over in surprise. What happened to His Highness's magical beast? Xianxia's figure flashed and disappeared from everyone's sight. Yanqing, who had just walked outside, couldn't help but look up and shook her head sympathetically. It seemed that it was provoked by Master again. Mystic Forest. Chu Luyue was wearing a pure gold sacred armor, blocking all the violent turbulence in the surroundings. Although they hadn't seen each other for a long time, this familiar feeling hadn't changed. Chu Luyue was happy in his heart, but he still couldn't figure out the mystery of Rong Xiu and the colored glass world. In the end, Chu Luyue gritted his teeth. The next time they meet, I must ask him face to face. All of a sudden, the surrounding light began to ripple like water. Chu Luyue looked down and vaguely saw that the light seemed to be coming from something. It was just that she was still unable to see clearly due to the surrounding light. But the closer he got, the heavier the pressure became. Dumpling's movements gradually slowed down. Clearly she was also being suppressed. Finally, one man and one beast landed. Chu Liyue jumped down from Dumpling's back. With the protection of the pure gold sacred armor, this power and pressure would not pose any threat to her. Therefore her movements were more agile. Dumpling had a few more wounds on her body, but fortunately, they were all superficial wounds and had already begun to heal. The bloodline power in its body was extremely strong, so its recovery ability naturally increased as well. Chu Liyue felt more at ease as she surveyed her surroundings. This place seemed to be just a simple cave. The walls were chiseled and the ground beneath his feet was hard and uneven, not black mud. In the middle there was a protruding rock. The rock's shape was irregular, and only the top seemed to have been flattened by something, making it smooth and clean. There's a piece of crystal on top. That crystal was about the size of an adult man's 2 palms. It was about an inch thick and had an irregular shape. It was glowing with a rich and clear green color like jade. As the light emitted from above was surging upwards, the space at the bottom wasn't affected much. Chu Liyue stared closely at that piece of crystal and vaguely saw a few broken runes on it. Could that be the broken seal that Qini mentioned previously? As Chu Liyue was thinking, she saw the runes on it floating gently. The light on the crystal also swayed as gently as water ripples. Chu Liyue took a step forward. Suddenly, she felt that the origin power in her body seemed to have become restless. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. She then realized that this crystal was actually absorbing the surrounding energy. The terrifying suction force that she felt just now was coming from above. She clenched her teeth and continued walking forward. Dumpling originally wanted to stop her, but after some thought she didn't say anything and just followed closely behind her. At the same time she handed something over. Chu Liyue turned around and realized that it was the black shield that she took from Shangguan previously. Oh, I shouldn't say that. Because this black shield was hers to begin with. Chu Liyue took the black shield and a hint of nostalgia flashed across her face. This black shield actually had a long history. Because of this, she found it together with the pure gold armor back then. At first, Chu Liyue thought that the armor and shield were a pair, but she later realized that wasn't the case. The pure gold armor quickly recognized its owner, and that was how she learned its name. However, she tried many methods to awaken this black shield, but she still couldn't. Thus, she didn't even know its name until now. However, even if she didn't inject her force and didn't recognize its owner, the defense of this black shield was still extremely strong. Therefore, Chu Liyue had always carried it with her and would only use it when she encountered a dangerous battle. The world only knew that the pure gold armor was a rare treasure, and the Empress relied on this armor to win every battle. But they didn't know that at least half of the credit belonged to this black shield. Actually, in Chu Liyue's heart, she had always thought that the level of this black shield might be stronger than the pure gold armor. Because until she broke through to the 8th rank warrior, she was still unable to move this black shield. Without any assistance, the power of this thing was still not inferior to the pure gold armor. If it really recognized its owner, she wondered how powerful it would be. Shangguan only thought that this black shield was useful and didn't take it to heart. Previously, when the black shield was snatched away, although she was furious, it was only because her item was snatched away and not because she felt that she had lost a treasure. If she knew the true power of this black shield in the future, she would probably regret it so much that her intestines would turn green. Chu Liyue placed the black shield in front of her and walked forward. With this layer of protection, that terrifying suction force was indeed blocked outside. Chu Liyue gradually got closer and stopped when she was 5 steps away from the crystal. She then looked at it intently. From here she could basically see the appearance of the crystal stone clearly. Suddenly Chu Liyue's eyes focused. In the middle of the crystal stone, there was a shuttle-like thing the size of a fingernail. Chu Liyue frowned with uncertainty. It seemed to be a seed. It's actually the origin slaughtering sacred seed. A voice filled with shock sounded. Chu Liyue turned her head. Taizu, you recognize this thing? What is the origin slaughtering sacred seed? She had never heard of it before. Taizu stared at the crystal stone with disbelief on his face. After a while he said, I do recognize it. Many years ago I saw it once, but at that time he had seen it in the hands of a great expert. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 752. Logically speaking, It was absolutely impossible for this thing to appear here. This was because the power of space here could not withstand the pressure of the Zhou Xian baby at all. He had once seen with his own eyes that the Almighty had used a heaven-wrecking holy seed to easily destroy a dynasty. That was right. It was a dynasty. An existence like the Tianling dynasty. It was not hard to imagine how terrifying this thing was. It was the first time that Chu Luiyue had seen Taizu with such an expression on his face. In fact, one could see some clues from the name. Zhou Xian baby. What kind of thing dared to have such a presumptuous name? Chu Luiyue had read countless books and she had even read many unique ancient books. However, she had never heard of this name before. Looking at Taizu's appearance, it must be very powerful. This thing can't be explained in a sentence or two. You only need to know that this thing is extremely powerful and also extremely dangerous. Taizu looked at Chu Luiyue with a grave expression. We can't stay here. We must leave as soon as possible. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly and looked up. How could they get out? Only then did Taizu realize that Chu Luiyue had been dragged down by this thing. It would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens if they wanted to go back. He sighed deeply and frowned. Looking at this thing now, it seemed to be very calm. It should be because it was trapped by the crystal outside. But who knew when it would come out? When that time came, even he would not be able to save Chu Luiyue. Seeing Taizu's worried look, Chu Luiyue was not particularly worried. She tried to persuade Taizu, don't worry too much. Maybe we can find a way to leave soon. Taizu sighed in his heart. This girl still did not know how terrifying the power of the Zhou Xian baby was. If this was an ordinary situation, why would he be so worried? He did not know who had placed the seal on it. Now that the seal had broken, he was afraid that. Chu Luiyue took a few steps back and sat cross-legged on the flat ground at the edge of the cliff. She held the black shield in front of her. Taizu looked at her in confusion. What are you doing? Chu Luiyue put her hands on her knees and smiled. Thinking won't solve any problems. It's better to take advantage of this time to cultivate. This place may be dangerous, but the energy of heaven and earth is very rich. The speed of cultivation is several times faster than in the outside. Taizu was dumbfounded. This was a matter of life and death. Why was this girl still thinking about these things? In such a short period of time, if he were to cultivate desperately, how much could he improve? He really didn't know whether to say that she was fearless because she didn't know, or that she had gone crazy from cultivating. Shang Guanjing held his forehead when he saw Chu Luiyue slowly close her eyes and really planned to start cultivating. Taizu. He really couldn't do anything to this girl. He looked back at the Zhou Xian baby and walked over to Chu Luiyue, resigned to his fate. If something really happened, the girl would be safer with him in front of her. Chu Luiyue opened her eyes and looked at the translucent figure standing in front of her. Her eyes welled up with tears and a warm current seemed to surge in her heart. Taizu, thank you. She said word by word seriously. Taizu turned around and looked at her with a deep gaze. Chu Luiyue was confused by this gaze. She unconsciously stopped her back and asked tentatively, what do you mean? Taizu? Taizu smiled bitterly, shook his head and sighed, but his expression was extremely gentle. Isn't it natural for me to protect my juniors? Chu Luiyue was stunned on the spot. Her mind went blank. Taizu knew. When did he know? She had never said. Seeing Chu Luiyue's expression, the last trace of doubt in Taizu's heart was completely eliminated. As expected, Chu Luiyue was really his bloodline. There seemed to be waves surging in the depths of his eyes as countless complicated emotions surged within. He had so many questions to ask her, but when they reached the tip of his tongue, he couldn't say anything. After a while, Chu Luiyue finally reacted and said hesitantly, Taizu, what do you mean by that? Ling Xiaopom. Seeing that Chu Luiyue still refused to admit it, Taizu smiled and shook his head. Ling Xiaopom can't be practiced by anyone who isn't a member of the Tianling dynasty's royal family. You, on the other hand, performed the third level, didn't you? Chu Luiyue suddenly understood. So that was it. At that time she had only thought that Shang Guanwan hadn't seen the third level of Ling Xiaopom, so she had simply made a move. However, she had forgotten that this palm technique was created by Taizu. Even if she had only sketched an outline and hadn't really performed it, Taizu's eyesight was extraordinary. From then on, the great ancestor should have guessed something, right? Being suddenly exposed like this, Chu Luiyue felt a little embarrassed for a moment. Thinking of the various disguises she had used to deceive Taizu, she didn't know how to face it. Taizu just looked at her quietly, his eyes kind. After a while, Tu Luiyue stood up. She looked deeply at Taizu, the corners of her eyes slightly red. Then she lifted the hem of her clothes, knelt down and bowed her head to kowtow. Unfilial descendant Shengguan Yu greets Taizu. Chu Luiyue was trapped, and the crowd outside was about to go crazy from anxiety. Lei Laoxi, Mu Hongyu and the rest searched seriously, and they had to confirm every face over and over again, afraid that they would miss something. However, even after they had checked all the people who were chased out, they still didn't find any traces of Chu Luiyue. Lei Laoxi was almost in despair as he stared at the rapidly withering mother tree in a daze. Could it be that Her Highness really, Laoxi, come back? Qin Yi suddenly spoke. Lei Laoxi turned around in a daze. Qin Yi shook his head silently. Since we've already searched one round and can't find Her Highness, then she must be trapped down there. Big brother. Lei Laoxi wasn't willing to move. We didn't protect Her Highness well in the past, and I didn't expect it to be the same this time. I only hate that I can't take Her Highness's place to suffer. If I could use my life to exchange for Her Highness's life, I definitely wouldn't have any objections. Qin Yi knew that once he became stubborn, even 9 bulls couldn't pull him back. Thus he decided not to persuade him and just looked at Chang Wanzhou at the side. Are you sure? Chang Wanzhou nodded. I can confirm that she's still alive. It's just that I can't find her location in such a short period of time. There seems to be an extremely strong force under this mystic forest that isolates everything. Qin Yi felt more at ease. My instincts also feel that Her Highness is fine, but if this drags on, it'll be hard to say. We must save her, but these people here are really troublesome. He looked at Shengguan Wan. At this moment Shengguan Wan was standing rooted to the ground in a daze, and her eyes were filled with shock. What happened just now? The pure gold armor actually turned into powder and completely disappeared. It was clearly fine just now. How did this happen? Quite a few people around saw this scene, and at this moment, they all quietened down and had different expressions. Amidst the embarrassing silence, a questioning voice that seemed to be suppressing something was clearly heard. Did the third princess break Her Highness pure gold sacred armor? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 753. This sentence was very cold and harsh, like a sharp thorn that directly pierced through the dead silence. Shengguan Wan looked in the direction of the voice and frowned. The person who spoke was a black cavalry soldier wearing armor. His face and body were covered in blood, and he was currently staring at her. His gaze was as cold as a knife, dense with anger that was about to burst out. Shengguan Wan's expression instantly turned cold. Who do you think you are? How dare you question this princess like this? Who gave a mere black cavalry soldier the courage to speak to her with such a tone and expression? Even an important official in the imperial court wouldn't dare to not give her face like this. That soldier straightened his neck and continued speaking. This lowly one is a black cavalry lieutenant, Tian Zhuangzhuang. This lowly one isn't questioning your highness, it's just a question. The pure gold armor was the crown princess's personal armor when she was alive, and it hasn't been broken after hundreds of battles. Now that it's being used by the third princess, it hasn't been through any battles, yet it's been directly destroyed. Third princess, don't you intend to explain? Shengguan Wan was so angry that she laughed. The crown princess? Shengguan Yu couldn't be more dead, and now the entire Tianling dynasty was under her, Shengguan Wan's control. She even killed Shengguan Yu, so what if she used her armor? Not to mention a mere black cavalry lieutenant, even in the entire Tianling dynasty, no one had the right to question her like this. It's just a piece of armor, why should this princess give you an explanation? She looked deeply at Tian Zhuangzhuang, then spoke lightly to Mu Qinghe. Vice Admiral Mu, this is the soldier you're leading? Isn't this too unruly? She didn't even need to personally deal with this kind of reckless person. With just a word, Mu Qinghe would have to deal with him. However, the expected scene didn't happen. Mu Qinghe's face was expressionless, but her chin was somewhat tense, as if covered with a layer of frost. This is indeed an item that Empress Concubine treasured greatly when she was alive. The third princess might not know this, but to the soldiers of the Black Cavalry, This pure gold sacred armor had an extraordinary meaning. Now that it has been destroyed, the last general knows that you didn't do it on purpose. But please give everyone an explanation. Shang Guanwan was shocked. Mu Qinghe. What is the meaning of this? Did he want her to explain or apologize? Just for a pure gold armor. Mu Qinghe met her gaze, her eyes firm and persistent. It was obvious that he wasn't going to let the matter rest. Shang Guanwan trembled with anger. The pure gold sacred armor suddenly shattered. She also didn't know what was going on. She didn't even have time to feel sorry for herself, yet she had to explain herself to these people? What a joke. She looked at Zhang Yuqing angrily. Mu Qinghe was his woman. However, Zhang Yuqing seemed to be in a daze. No one knew what he was thinking. Shang Guanwan called him twice before he came back to his senses. However, there was still a hint of disappointment and worry in his eyes. Shang Guanwan rarely saw him like this and she felt uneasy. But the most important thing now was still the pure gold sacred armor. After Zhang Yuqing reacted, he frowned and looked at Shang Guanwan. What kind of powerful treasure was the pure gold sacred armor? It had always been fine. Why did it suddenly shatter when Shang Guanwan wore it? Shang Guanwan was infuriated by his glare. However, considering that there were still many people watching, she could only swallow her anger. Zhang Yuqing also cared about each other's face and didn't say anything in front of Mu Qinghe. The third princess has just experienced a life-and-death situation and is still in shock. Although the pure gold sacred armor is important, it's not as important as her. You are the Black Cavalry. You know best what your first priority is. Don't forget your identity. These words were very serious. If it was in the past, Mu Qinghe would definitely not continue to say anything. But it was different this time. Mu Qinghe's expression didn't change as she said calmly, "Eldest young master, it's precisely because we are all Black Cavalry that we are very insistent on this matter. Even if I don't ask, they will ask until they get a reasonable explanation." Zhang Yuqing frowned and looked at the Black Cavalry around him. Sure enough, those soldiers had already gathered around and were looking over here. Moreover, their expressions were stubborn, exactly the same as Tian Zhuangzhuang who asked first. It was as if they wouldn't leave if Shang Guanwan didn't explain. The atmosphere was heavy. There was dead silence. At this point, Shang Guanwan finally realized that something was amiss, and a hint of panic flashed across her eyes. "What are you planning to do? Are you trying to rebel?" Mu Qinghe said, "The third princess is too serious." "Third princess, you're being too serious. They just want an explanation from you." "Explanation? What explanation do they need?" Ever since Shang Guanwan took over power, she had never been so aggrieved. Previously, these people had clearly obeyed her every word. But just because she had destroyed a pure gold armor, they actually turned their backs on her. Extremely arrogant and presumptuous. When Qin Yi saw this scene from afar, a cold smile appeared on his lips. How would Shang Guanwan, who had grown up in Xiling City with a silver spoon in her mouth, understand that military power had always been independent of imperial power? Back then, how many Black Cavalry did Her Highness risk her life to save? On the surface, this military power seemed to belong to Mu Qinghe. But in reality, it belonged to Her Highness. It was fine if they didn't mention it normally, but now that Shang Guanwan destroyed the pure gold sacred armor, it was no different from stepping on everyone's bottom line. They naturally wouldn't let her off so easily. Shang Guanwan clenched her fists tightly and almost crushed her teeth. "Shang Guanyu is dead, but I'm still restricted by her everywhere." She angrily said, "It's just a piece of scrap metal. So what if it's gone? What's there to explain?" The moment she said that, murderous intent rose from all directions. "Third princess, please be careful with your words." Digression. Tomorrow at 12 a.m. mobile users please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from AI Web. Chapter 754. These words came out of Mu Qinghe's mouth. Shang Guanwan looked at him in shock. Did Mu Qinghe know who he was talking to? But immediately she felt that the atmosphere around her seemed to have changed. She looked around and saw that the Black Cavalry were all looking at her, their eyes full of suppressed anger. These were all soldiers who had experienced life and death on the battlefield, and they all carried a strong murderous aura. It was fine when they were restrained, but once they exploded, it was shockingly terrifying. Even someone as tough as Shangguan felt a trace of fear in her heart. She even had a faint premonition that if she really angered these people, she might not even be able to walk out of the mystic forest. The way these people looked at her didn't seem like they were looking at the high and mighty third princess, but more like they were looking at an ignorant person who didn't know what was good for her. Elder Qiushi sensed that something was wrong and immediately stepped forward and said angrily, "Vice Admiral Mu, are you threatening the third princess?" Mu Qinghe looked at him coldly, his eyes full of undisguised murderous intent. Elder Qiushi's heart thumped and a trace of fear suddenly appeared. His old face trembled and he unconsciously took half a step back. Mu Qinghe was a high-ranking general of the Tianling dynasty, and he was also the famous god of slaughter. His style of doing things was straightforward and his methods were fierce. Over the years, countless people had died at his hands. He had been very low-key for more than a year, so much so that Elder Qiushi almost forgot what a terrifying person he was. Until now, when he met Mu Qinghe's cold and stern eyes, he suddenly remembered that he couldn't afford to offend this person. In addition to his own strength, he also led tens of thousands of loyal black cavalry. He was just an elder of the imperial family. Although his title sounded good, how could he be a match for Mu Qinghe? Thinking of this, Elder Qiushi was terrified. Shangguan was angry, and her body trembled slightly as she looked at Elder Qiushi. Useless thing. Jiang Yuqing originally wanted to speak up for Shangguan, but in the current situation if she didn't lower her head, it wouldn't be easy. His voice grew more serious. Shangguan bit her lips as her emotions churned. Finally she gritted her teeth and said, "That pure gold armor was fine before but it suddenly shattered. I don't know what happened either. Many people were there just now. There should be many people who can prove that I didn't do anything." The pure gold armor suddenly shattered by itself. Jiang Yuqing nodded. "That's right. That's what I saw." Soon after, a few more people gave the same response. However, many of the black cavalry soldiers were not satisfied with this explanation. What kind of explanation was this? Whispers of discussion could be heard from the crowd. Her Highness the Empress concubine has worn the pure gold sacred armor so many times without any problems. The third princess only wore it once and it was directly damaged? That's right. Although Her Highness the Empress concubine is no longer around, this is her relic after all. The third princess used it just like that. Truly. It's fine if she used it properly, but now that the pure gold sacred armor is completely damaged and doesn't leave any traces, the third princess doesn't feel guilty at all. Instead, she's so self-righteous. Although everyone had lowered their voices, the people nearby could hear them. This was especially so for Shangguan, who heard it clearly. Wasn't this equivalent to criticizing her in front of her? These black cavalry soldiers were too much. Shangguan took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in her heart with great difficulty. She could already tell that these black cavalry soldiers respected Shangguan very much. She couldn't do anything to them in a short period of time. The pure gold sacred armor was already gone. She couldn't lose more because of this. She really angered these people. Who knew what they would do? Her tone finally softened. I naturally know that the pure gold sacred armor is an extremely precious item to my elder sister. It's also because of this that I took it out again. If my elder sister's spirit is in heaven, she definitely wouldn't want to see the pure gold sacred armor placed on a shelf, right? This consort personally believes that an item like this should only be used to its fullest potential. I just didn't expect such a thing to happen this time. Just now, I also went through a few life and death situations, so I was a little emotional for a moment. What I said just now wasn't intentional. This consort already feels extremely remorseful for breaking eldest sister's things. Shangguan's voice even sounded a little choked as she spoke. Not to mention other things, her acting skills were still very good. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to reach her current position. Tianzhuang turned his face away with a hint of disdain in his eyes. Only a brainless person would believe Shangguan's explanation. If she hadn't been forced to this extent, she would probably still be as arrogant as before. Like Tianzhuang, most of the black cavalry soldiers disdained Shangguan's words. Jiang Yuqing came out to smooth things over. Alright, let's end this matter here for now. Right now it's more important to leave this mystic forest first. Half of the leaves on that mother tree had already withered and fallen. It wouldn't be long before it completely withered. When those Wan Yeshan withered, the entire mystic forest was almost turned upside down. Who knew what the consequences would be if something happened to this mother tree? Mu Qinghe also glanced at the mother tree and nodded gently. Soldiers of the Black Cavalry, listen up. Gather. Yes. Mu Qinghe gave the order and immediately received everyone's response. All the soldiers ran one after another and lined up neatly in a short while. There were also people who were seriously injured who were taken care of by the side. On the battlefield they had encountered situations that were several times more tragic than this. It was naturally not a problem to deal with such a situation. Mu Qinghe glanced around. All captains, report the number of survivors. Tian Zhuangzhuang straightened his back. Reporting, first squad of the Black Cavalry, 63 survivors. When they arrived there were a total of 10 squads. Each squad had 100 soldiers and was led by a captain. Out of 100 people, 63 survived. The casualties could be said to be heavy. The other captains also reported the situation of their squads. Among them, 4 captains of the squads died. With every sentence, Mu Qinghe's face turned colder. Although he had roughly guessed this number before, when he heard the confirmation his heart still wavered. With every sentence the surrounding atmosphere became more and more solemn. By the time the last person finished speaking, the entire forest had fallen silent. Before they came, the Black Cavalry had 1,000 people. Now only 617 of them were left. Nearly 400 of them were rescued by Chu Luiyue and the others. Without them the consequences would be even more unimaginable. They had only entered the mystic forest once and almost half of them had died. The situation of the other sects was not much better. Basically 1/3 of them had died. At this moment Shangguanwan said, "We can't stay here anymore. Let's go to the Mirror Lake." Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 755. Once she said that, she immediately attracted all kinds of gazes. Even Jiang Yuqing frowned and looked at her disapprovingly. We're all heavily injured now. The most important thing is to leave as soon as possible. I'm afraid it's not appropriate to go to Mirror Lake now, right? Shangguanwan pressed her lips together and knitted her brows. But we haven't found any of the herbs we wanted for father. If I return to Xiling empty-handed like this, I don't know how the world will criticize and ridicule me. Besides, my Yuan meridian hasn't fully recovered yet. Once I return to Xiling it won't be as easy as here. I'm just one step away. I'm definitely not willing to give up just like that. Also, even though an accident happened in the Mystic Forest, it might not be the same in Mirror Lake. Dahuang Swamp is vast and boundless. If we only come to the Mystic Forest once and leave without finding anything, then what's the point of this trip? Jiang Yuqing was silent for a moment. Although he knew that whatever Shangguanwan said and did now was for herself, what she said was not without reason. Back then, everyone in Xiling knew that they came in such a grandiose manner. If they returned just like that, it would indeed be hard to say. After thinking for a long time, he could only agree. Okay, then we'll go to Mirror Lake next. However, if we encounter such danger again, we must immediately leave Dahuang Swamp without hesitation. Shangguanwan naturally agreed. Since the 2 people with the highest statuses had decided on this matter, the rest had to comply even if they didn't want to. At this point, the Mystic Forest's periphery had stopped collapsing. Even though the ground was uneven, it could still allow everyone to leave successfully. After the crowd, Mu Hongyu and the rest didn't move as they stood beside Qin Yi with worried expressions. "Big brother Qin, can you find where Lu Yu is now?" Qin Yi pondered for a moment and shook his head lightly. "There's a force below blocking everything outside, so I can't investigate. However, I can confirm that the force came from the mother tree. So, it definitely has something to do with the Mystic Forest becoming like this." Yi Ran clasped his hands and asked worriedly, "Then could Lu Yu be under the mother tree? If we go down, will we be able to find her?" Qin Yi sighed softly. If only things were that simple. In fact, he was already certain that Chu Luiyue was indeed under the mother tree. The powerful energy that had spread out should have been released after the seal had been broken. Since Chang Wanzhou was certain that Chu Luiyue was still alive, she was most likely there. However, he and Lei Laosi had stayed here for close to 2 years, and they didn't know what exactly was down there. Judging from the current situation, they wouldn't be able to break in any time soon, let alone find out. Liu is still alive. A voice filled with shock and surprise was heard. They turned around. Senior brother Zhu Hong? Mu Hongyu quickly glanced at Zhu Hong. His injuries were basically fine and there were still a few people standing behind him. They were all Dragon Teeth Mountain disciples. You didn't follow them? Asked Mu Hongyu strangely. Zhu Hong shook his head. You saved our lives. How can we just leave like that? He previously thought that Chu Liyue was already dead, so he felt terrible for a long time. Seeing that Mu Hongyu and the rest were still standing there, he was curious and came over. In the end, he happened to hear them discussing how to find Chu Liyue. Not mentioning other things, Qin Yi and Lei Laosi were very strong. If they believed that Chu Liyue was still alive, then it shouldn't be wrong. He originally didn't want to believe that Chu Liyue was dead. Now that he heard that there was still hope, he naturally wanted to search for her. Then Zhu Hong looked at Qin Yi and bowed solemnly. He could tell that Qin Yi was the strongest among them and was also the backbone of the group. The most important thing was that Qin Yi was willing to help find Chu Liyue. Young Master Qin, we know that we're weak and injured, so we can't help much. However, Lu Yu did us a huge favor and we'll definitely repay him. If you have any requests, just let us know. As long as we can help even a little, we'll be happy. Qin Yi glanced at him and his gaze became gentler, but he still shook his head. I understand your intentions, but this place is really dangerous. But this place is indeed dangerous. You can't stay here. The faces of Zhu Hong and the others were filled with disappointment. The hidden force below is extremely scary. Once it explodes, even fourth brother and I might not be able to protect you. If something really happens, wouldn't it be a waste of her efforts to save you? Qin Yi's tone was very calm, but every word he said was like a stone that heavily smashed into everyone's hearts. Zhu Hong laughed bitterly. He understood that Qin Yi's words were very tactful. All of them were more or less injured. I'm not afraid of not being able to help. I'm just afraid that I'll become a burden instead. After thinking for a while, Zhu Hong sighed. Young Master Qin is right. I'll leave the matter of finding Lu Yu to you. Qin Yi nodded lightly. These few people from Dragon Teeth Mountain have good characters and are more sensible. Can be seen that Xianxia taught them well. On the other hand, Song Qingyan hurriedly left with Shangguan Wan and the rest when he heard that this place was dangerous. Zhu Hong looked at Mu Hongyu. Originally, he wanted to persuade Mu Hongyu to leave with them, but he thought that she was close friends with Chu Liyue and definitely wouldn't be willing to leave. Thus he didn't say that. Hongyu, you guys be careful. Mu Hongyu isn't injured and has a faint yuan body. She might really be able to help Qin Yi and the rest. Mu Hongyu nodded. Senior brothers and senior sisters, be careful. Very quickly, Zhu Hong and the rest also left with the group. Only Qin Yi and the rest were left on the spot. The mother tree was still rapidly withering. After walking for some distance, Shangguan Wan looked back and vaguely saw that there were still a few people standing there without moving. She narrowed her eyes. Qin Yi and Lei Laosi aren't our people, so it's normal for them not to leave with us. However, why are the others still waiting there? Jiang Yuqing followed her line of sight and looked back, frowning slightly. What are they doing there? Shangguan Wan sneered in her heart. Are they still waiting for Chu Liyue to come back from the dead? Digression. I'm about to turn into a raisin. Make up at 6 p.m. Also, mobile users with today's update, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from LoveWeb. Chapter 756. They probably don't want to believe the truth and want to continue searching for Chu Liyue's traces. Shangguan Wan said nonchalantly, but her eyes were filled with disdain and mockery. Jiang Yuqing saw her expression, and a tinge of impatience and disgust rose in his heart. His expression also became much colder as he looked at Mu Qinghe. They came together after all. How can we leave them behind alone? Go and call them back. Mu Qinghe's brows moved slightly and a tinge of surprise flashed across her eyes. Jiang Yuqing doesn't seem to have a good relationship with Chongshu Pavilion. Why is he concerned about the lives of our disciples at this time? This really doesn't match his usual style of doing things. As she was too shocked, Mu Qinghe paused for a moment before nodding. The last general will. Why do you care about them? Shangguan Wan suddenly spoke and interrupted Mu Qinghe. As if realizing that her words were a little inappropriate, her expression changed slightly as she coughed and added a few more sentences. Oh, what I mean is that their hearts and minds are filled with finding Chu Liwei. It's useless for anyone to persuade them. They might even end up being blamed in the end. Even though they came together, this is what they want to do. Outsiders have no right to interfere, right? She looked at Jiang Yuqing meaningfully and seemingly smiled. Yuqing, I know you have good intentions, but sometimes good intentions often lead to bad things. Anyway, with Qin Yi and Lei Laoxi around, nothing will happen to them. They might even want to follow Qin Yi and Lei Laoxi. But in this Dahuang swamp, it's really dangerous for a few people to be alone. Jiang Yuqing knitted his brows. Why don't we send a portion of the Black Cavalry and go together with them? Together with what? Shang Wanwan cut him off as if she was joking. Yuqing, don't tell me you want to find Chu Liwei too? We know you. We know you're doing this for their own good. But in the eyes of those who don't know what's going on, that might not necessarily be the case. You don't want to be misunderstood, do you? The fire in Jiang Yuqing's chest arched, and he finally suppressed it with great difficulty. I got it. What you said makes sense. Just let them be. Only then did Shang Wanwan stop and lower her eyes. However, the bottom of her heart was not so calm. She had deliberately mentioned Chu Liwei just now to test him. She could clearly see the panic in Jiang Yuqing's eyes for a moment. Why was he panicking? Shang Wanwan walked forward step by step, but her body was tense and her hands were tightly clenched. Her face was covered with a veil and there were scars on her face, so it was not easy for others to see her expression. However, the aura around her was extremely cold. She had long suspected that Jiang Yuqing had feelings for Chu Liwei, and now it seemed that it was true. If it were someone else, he would definitely not say a word. Was it just because of the somewhat similar eyebrows? Shang Wanwan was unconvinced and unwilling to accept it. Although the two of them had killed Shang Guanyu together, she knew that many years ago Jiang Yuqing did indeed like Shang Haiyu. However, for some reason, it seemed that his attitude toward Shang Haiyu changed overnight. Until now, she still did not know why. She had never asked. Jiang Yuqing also liked her, but this kind of like was different from the kind of like he used to like Shang Haiyu. She knew that once she asked, many things would be different. He was not that stupid. Besides, Shang Haiyu was dead after all. What was the point of arguing with a dead person? However, this time Jiang Yuqing felt that familiar uneasiness toward Chu Liwei. Shang Wanwan glanced at Jiang Yuqing. He fell into deep thought again. No one knew what he was thinking. Along the way, he had lost count of how many times he had been like this. The people who could make him feel this way were Shang Haiyu and Chu Liwei. Shang Wanwan wanted to flare up, but she suppressed it. In the end, both of them were dead. Just like that, Shang Wanwan secretly comforted herself for a long time before she finally calmed down. However, Jiang Yuqing, who was next to her, did not notice it at all. Or perhaps he noticed it, but he was too lazy to care. The two of them walked forward together, but they had different thoughts and did not speak. A few hours later, they finally walked out of the mystic forest and arrived at the border of Mirror Lake. Mirror Lake is up ahead. Mu Qing has said in a low voice. Shang Wanwan perked up and looked forward. At this time, the sun was setting in the west. At the border where the water met the sky, large patches of clouds floated. Light pierced through the clouds and dyed half the sky a brilliant gold. Below, Mirror Lake was boundless, reflecting the scenery in the sky. At first glance, it looked like a huge mirror on the ground. Everyone quieted down. Such a scene could be considered as a paradise on earth. I didn't expect the scenery of Mirror Lake to be so beautiful. Yeah. Just one look and I'm mesmerized. This is the most beautiful place I've seen in my life. It looks calm and peaceful. It doesn't seem as scary as the rumors say. Many disciples walked forward and looked at the scenery with intoxicated expressions. They praised it one after another. Compared to the purgatory-like mystic forest, this place was many times better. However, while they were immersed in the moving scenery of Mirror Lake, many of the Black Cavalry members looked tense. He seemed to be very nervous. Even Mu Qinghe was no exception. Your Highness, First Young Master, Mirror Lake looks peaceful, but it's actually as dangerous as the mystic forest. It's better to be careful. He originally wanted to say that Mirror Lake was more dangerous than the mystic forest, but after considering what happened in the mystic forest, he decided to put the two on the same level. Of the three places in Dahuang Swamp, this is the place with the highest number of deaths. Mu Qinghe's words made everyone quiet down. Many of the sect disciples who had previously yearned for the Mirror Lake were stunned when they heard this. They looked at each other in dismay. Shang Wanwan was also surprised. Really? But Mirror Lake doesn't look like anything. Wait, what's that? Everyone followed her line of sight. In the middle of Mirror Lake, there was a flower breaking out of the water and rising slowly. It was a palm-sized flower with a total of 5 petals that were pink and white in color. Under the afterglow of the setting sun, it looked translucent. Looked magnificent and beautiful. When the breeze blew, it swayed gently. Elder Qiushi suddenly widened his eyes in shock. Isn't that the dancing lotus? Shang Wanwan was pleasantly surprised. Elder Qiushi, are you sure that's the dancing lotus? It was rumored to be a top-grade medicinal herb that could revive the dead and regrow flesh and bones. The dancing lotus. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 757. I've only seen it in ancient books, but looking at its appearance it should be close to the mark. Elder Qiushi was also very excited and his face flushed. Even in the entire Tianling dynasty, there might not be such a rare treasure. Rumor has it that the dancing lotus takes 100 years to germinate, 100 years to grow branches and 300 years to bloom. However, its flowering period was only a short 5 years. If no one plucked it within 5 years, the dancing lotus flower would fall and bear fruit again, entering another 500-year cycle. Currently, this dancing lotus flower was in its flowering period. Elder Qiushi's eyes lit up. Your Highness, we've really come to the right place this time. As long as we have this dancing lotus, His Majesty's health will definitely improve. Although the few herbs that they planned to find previously were also considered treasures, compared to this dancing lotus, they were many levels apart. Shang Wanwan was also very happy. This time she came to Da Huang's swamp in the name of finding herbs for her father. The only mythical beast had already died with Chu Luiyue. It would probably be difficult to meet another one. However, as long as they had this dancing lotus, they didn't need to find any other herbs. It would definitely be perfect to bring it back. It must be the third princess's filial piety that allowed us to encounter this dancing lotus. Elder Qiushi sighed and didn't forget to flatter her. As expected, Shang Wanwan's mood became better after hearing that. What? It's clearly because father is the emperor and is blessed with good fortune. I can only see this dancing lotus because of fate. With this dancing lotus she only needed to take a small portion and she might be able to heal all the injuries on her face and body. Thinking of this, Shang Wanwan yearned for it even more and she was about to move forward. However, just as she took half a step she recalled what Mu Qinghe said just now. This Mirror Lake doesn't seem to be an ordinary dangerous place. She looked at Mu Qinghe. Vice Admiral Mu, you know this Mirror Lake the best. I wonder if you have a way to get that dancing lotus? After Shang Wanwan and the rest left with the large group, Mu Hongyu and the rest were left behind. After confirming that there was no one else around, Lei Laosi finally spoke. Big brother, do you have a way to find her? His expression was nervous and worried, and there was a trace of fear in the depths of his eyes. He was really worried that something would happen to His Highness. Even with the crimson gold-red phoenix, she was only a rank 5 warrior. If she encountered great danger, after all, even he was shocked by the power that was faintly spreading from the mother tree. Qin Yi furrowed his brows slightly as he looked at the mother tree and narrowed his eyes. He should be down here, but none of us should be able to enter at the moment. As soon as he finished speaking, a look of despair appeared on their faces. Even young Master Qin can't do it? Yi Ranran asked softly with reddened eyes. Qin Yi was the strongest among them. If he said that he couldn't do it, then... Qin Yi sighed and looked at Chang Wanzhou. Do you know how she is now? Chang Wanzhou pressed his lips tightly together and shook his head. He was more sensitive than the average person. In addition, the Cloud Sky Copper Sword was personally made by him, so he could usually determine her position more quickly and accurately and know if she was dead or alive. However, he couldn't do more than that. Also, as Qin Yi said, there was indeed a force below that blocked everything outside, so they couldn't detect any movement at all. At this point, there was basically only a quarter of the leaves on the mother tree left. Qin Yi glanced at it and suddenly waved his sleeves to set up a barrier. The green barrier instantly enveloped Mu Hongyu and the rest. Compared to the previous barrier he set up, the aura this time was clearly much stronger. Mu Hongyu and the rest looked at each other in shock. Qin Yi's cultivation level seemed to be much stronger than what we imagined. He actually hid his true abilities previously. Laozi, stay here and look after them. I'll be back soon. Lei Laozi immediately said, Big brother, I'll go with you. Qin Yi shook his head. Nobody knew what would happen next, so it was better to be careful. These few people were all friends that Her Highness valued, so he naturally had to protect them well. Lei Laozi could only stay on the spot. Qin Yi walked forward. The withered leaves fell down and landed on his head and body. He raised his hand, picked up a leaf and took a closer look. The originally emerald green leaf rapidly turned yellow and curled up within a few seconds. The energy and vitality contained in it seemed to have been sucked away by something. He knitted his brows and looked forward. A branch suddenly broke and fell from above. Without a doubt, that branch had also completely withered. Qin Yi glanced at it and was about to continue walking forward when he suddenly realized that a dark green glow seemed to have flashed across the spot where the branch broke. He took 2 steps closer and lowered his head to take a look. As expected, there was a faint dark green glow at the spot where the branch broke. His heart skipped a beat and he waved his hand to cut off a branch. The branch fell at the same spot and in the same scene. At this moment, a cracking sound was heard from the front. Qin Yi immediately looked up and saw that there was actually a crack on the extremely thick tree trunk. That crack was only the thickness of a finger and an inch long. Compared to the entire tree, it wasn't worth mentioning at all. However, very quickly a dark green glow shone out from within. Deep underground in the cave, the glow shone in all directions. The entire space was silent. That's roughly what happened. Chu Liwei calmly explained her situation to Taizu briefly before kneeling down and kowtowing again. I hid a lot of things from Taizu previously, so please forgive me, Taizu. Taizu looked at her deeply, reached out and gently caressed her hair as he sighed. Child, it's been hard on you. Digression. It's already a lousy February. It should be at 9 p.m. and will continue to be updated. Those who can't wait until tomorrow can also watch it. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 758. When Chu Liwei talked about the past previously, she had always been very calm. Although those people and those things were like the sharpest blade, leaving the deepest and most painful scars on her. But now she could face it calmly. His tone was calm and his expression was indifferent, as if he was talking about someone else. However, when Taizu said that sentence, Chu Liue's nose twitched and her eyes turned red. Those painful memories could no longer affect her in the slightest. She thought her heart was as hard as a rock. She didn't expect to be so easily defeated by Taizu's words. Although Taizu didn't have a physical body, Chu Liwei couldn't feel his caress. However, she seemed to have been comforted by something in an instant. A hole opened up in the dam that had been built high in her heart, allowing the countless suppressed emotions to surge out like a flood. Chu Liwei closed her eyes and a hot tear fell silently. After a while she raised her head and smiled at Taizu. Taizu's words were enough for Lu Yu. Taizu looked at the girl in front of him, his eyes full of pity. When he saw Chu Liwei perform the 3rd level of the Lingxiao palm, countless conjectures flashed through his mind. But he still didn't expect her experience to be so rough and strange. He sighed and shook his head and a trace of anger flashed across his face. I didn't expect that there would be such a despicable person in the Shangguan family. Shangguan really doesn't deserve this name. He didn't take Shangguan seriously before. He just felt that this junior was not generous enough and seemed to be quite scheming, so he didn't like her very much. But he didn't expect that she would do such a thing as killing her own clan and deceiving her superiors and subordinates. In order to get everything she wanted, she was really crazy. If the Tianling dynasty is really handed over to her, I'm afraid the consequences will be unimaginable. Perhaps the 1,000-year foundation of the Tianling dynasty will be destroyed in Shangguan's hands. Chu Liwei said word by word, Taizu, don't worry. Don't worry, ancestor. With Liwei around, I definitely won't let her have her way. She will eventually pay the price for everything she has done. Taizu looked at Chu Liwei with a relieved expression. Fortunately, in the Shangguan family besides her, there's still a good child like you, Lu Yu. Suddenly thinking of something, the great ancestor suddenly laughed and said, No wonder I felt very close to you when I saw you. We are family. Back then, after he left the Tianling god realm with Chu Liyue, he was very curious about everything about the Tianling royal family. When Chu Liyue went to the palace to see Shangguan, he had secretly tried to look at Shangguan. In the end, he was greatly disappointed. In comparison, he still liked Chu Liyue more, so he had always been by her side. He gradually lost interest in the Tianling royal family. After going one round, it turned out that Chu Liyue was a member of the Shangguan family. Chu Liyue blinked. Taizu, it's good that you don't blame me. You don't know, but when you agreed to give me the Long Yuan sword, I almost wanted to confess to you. But the situation was urgent and I didn't want to implicate you, so I didn't say it in the end. Please don't take offense. Taizu snorted. You are Shangguan Jing's junior. What can't you say? If I had known that Shangguan and Zhang Yuqing had bullied you to this extent, I definitely wouldn't have let them off. His brows furrowed slightly. I don't even have enough time to feel sorry for you. How can I bear to blame you? Chu Liyue's heart warmed. The feeling of someone standing on the same side as her, unconditionally believing and supporting her and willing to stand up for her. It was too beautiful and precious. The former Shangguan Yu had lost everything and only her father was left. Furthermore, he had been poisoned and fell into a coma. Until today it was difficult for her to even see him once. And now, Chu Liyue had elders who doted on her and trusted friends. There was also Rong Xiu who would always place her at the top of his heart. Back then I was willing to give you the Long Yuan sword for 2 reasons. Taizu's expression became much more serious. Chu Liyue subconsciously straightened her back. Firstly, the Long Yuan sword awakened and chose you as its new master. Although it's a Yuan instrument that I refined, it has its own intelligence. You should know that many people from the Tianling dynasty have entered the Tianling god realm over the years to ask for the Long Yuan sword, but they all failed in the end. And when you appeared, the Long Yuan sword reacted very quickly and woke up. It's not just me. It has also waited for 1,000 years for a new master that it likes. Now that it finally chose you, I naturally won't object. Chu Liyue narrowed her eyes and finally asked the question in her heart. Even so, you spent a lot of effort to refine the Long Yuan sword. You should have wanted to leave it for the Tianling royal family. But at that time you didn't know my identity. Why did you still give it to me so straightforwardly? Chu Liyue believed that if Taizu wanted to stop her, he would definitely be able to. But he didn't. Instead, he gave the Long Yuan sword to her very generously. Chu Liyue couldn't figure this out no matter how hard she tried. If it was any other treasure, it would be fine if he gave it to an outsider. But this Long Yuan sword was a symbol of Taizu's identity and also an existence that was like a sacred item of the Tianling dynasty. Its significance was extraordinary. Taizu giving it to her so straightforwardly was really out of her expectations. This is the second point that I want to talk about. Taizu paused for a moment and looked at Chu Liyue with a complicated gaze. You probably don't know yet, but inside the black pyramid in your body, there seems to be a bloodline power of the Tianling royal family. Digression. A wasted February was dragged to work by mobile users. Please browse and read at around 9:30 p.m. A better reading experience comes from Ijing. Chapter 759. Once he said that, Chu Liyue was dazed. She looked at Taizu in a daze. What do you mean by that? Taizu looked into Chu Liyue's eyes and said firmly. It means that there's the aura of a member of the Tianling royal family hidden inside. According to my guess, it's very likely to be a soul. Chu Liyue's pupils constricted and she almost blurted out. How is that possible? It's really very likely. Taizu put his hands behind his back with a solemn expression. If it's just a pure force, what's the point of locking it up like this? Do you still remember the scene when you flew down the crater and entered the space under the Long Yuan sword? Countless images flashed through Chu Liyue's mind. Of course she remembered. Everything that happened that day was still vivid in her mind. Do you know that I specially set up that space? Those who aren't from the Tianling royal family aren't allowed to enter. Taizu's words were like a heavy hammer that smashed Chu Liyue's head hard. Her eyes suddenly lit up. That's right. When she jumped down the crater, sword aura was everywhere. At the crucial moment, the black pyramid flew out and opened the door, allowing her to enter. Later, a crack appeared on the seal of the black pyramid. At that time I sensed that the aura inside was extremely familiar. At that time I thought that the soul of a descendant of the Tianling royal family was sealed inside, so I agreed to give you the Long Yuan sword and leave the Tianling god realm with you. Taizu originally wanted to take the opportunity to attack the Black Pyramid again to see what secrets were hidden inside. In the end, that crack actually repaired itself. The aura inside was isolated again. With his current cultivation level and strength, it was really difficult to break that seal. Therefore he put this matter aside for now. It wasn't until today that he confirmed Chu Liuyue's identity that he finally told her everything. Chu Liyue listened bit by bit, and it was as if stormy waves had surged in her heart. She had guessed countless times what was hidden in the Black Pyramid, but she had never thought of this possibility. Are you sure that it's really? Chu Liyue's throat tightened. Taizu nodded. Absolutely. Chu Liyue closed his eyes. Since the Taizu were so certain, then this matter was most likely true. However, this was simply too inconceivable. To tell you the truth, I accidentally obtained this item in country Yaochen's imperial mausoleum. Originally there was no seal on it, but I met a mysterious person who forcefully sealed it and gave it to me. As Chu Liyue spoke, he stretched out his right hand. The Black Pyramid appeared in her palm. Its surface was dull and pitch black and it looked very ordinary. The crack that had appeared earlier had indeed been repaired. Chu Liyue frowned. If there really was a person's soul inside, then who could it be? The Tianling dynasty had been passed down for thousands of years, and there was no way to find out. What was even stranger was why it would appear in country Yaochen's imperial mausoleum. Country Yaochen had existed for much shorter time than the Tianling dynasty, but even so it was difficult to find the answer. In her impression, none of the ancestors of the Tianling dynasty had been to country Yaochen. However, history books did not represent the real history. Other than the people involved, no one else would know what had happened. If only we could break this seal, Taizu said. Do you know who set up the seal? Chu Liyue shook her head. I've never seen the other party. I only know that it seems to be a man. That's difficult. If we don't break the seal, we won't be able to determine who the soul inside belongs to. Taizu was a little puzzled. I wonder what the person who did this is after. Chu Liyue stared at the Black Pyramid in her hand and suddenly said, Taizu, I don't think this seal was repaired by itself. It was repaired by the person who set up this seal. Why do you say that? Chu Liyue was silent for a moment and shook her head. This is just my intuition. If that person did it, why did he return this thing to you back then? Couldn't he just keep it for himself? If that person was willing to put in so much effort to set up this barrier, it meant that this thing must be very important to that person. Then why did he spend so much effort to put it in Chu Liyue's hands? Chu Liyue fell into deep thought. Taizu's words were not without reason. If only she had seen the appearance of the great master back then. After thinking for a long time, she still had no clue. In the end, Chu Liyue could only put away the Black Pyramid and put this matter aside. She had a premonition that the great master would definitely come looking for her again. One day she would find out the real secret hidden here. After dealing with all these matters, Chu Liyue sat cross-legged again. She let out a long breath and prepared to cultivate. This time Taizu did not say anything. He just stood in front of her and silently protected her. Chu Liyue closed her eyes and concentrated. After a period of time, the concentration of heaven and earth energy in the surroundings increased by a lot. It could be seen that in this short period of time, the two Tian baby had swallowed a lot of energy. The water droplet in her dantian began to slowly rotate. The surrounding energy, which was originally flowing towards the two Tian baby, gradually changed direction. Taizu did not notice at first, but when he saw the dark green light around him shake like water waves, he curiously turned around to take a look. He was shocked on the spot by what he saw. Chu Liuyue's body was already enveloped by a layer of dark green light. The surrounding energy was pouring into her body. She sat there quietly like a statue, as motionless as a mountain, and quickly absorbed the energy. And the speed was getting faster and faster. The great ancestor was horrified. Chu Liyue, she was actually snatching the energy from the two Tian baby? He originally thought that she was at most recuperating for a while. He did not expect that she was actually planning to cultivate, and the key point was that she did it. The two Tian baby looked like a small bead, but in fact, it was very domineering. The entire mystic forest was under its control. Everything that had happened before was actually its doing. It could quickly devour all the energy in the surrounding space. In the end, it caused the space to completely collapse. Chu Liyue was actually able to snatch energy from it for her own cultivation. Even he might not be able to do it. Moreover, Chu Liyue was only a stage 5 warrior now. Taizu was dumbfounded. Chu Liyue knew nothing about this. In her opinion, she was just absorbing the energy of heaven and earth around her to cultivate. Well, the speed of the water droplet's rotation seemed to be a little faster than before. 5 lines swayed gently on the water droplet. The crystal suddenly swayed and floated towards Chu Liyue. Taizu sucked in a breath of cold air. Chu Liyue was trying to snatch food from the tiger's mouth. Digression. Another mistake after writing. I almost lost the manuscript. After looking for it for a long time, I'm tired. Let's go eat. There's nothing to eat today. Dozens of demons have been eaten. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience from love. Chapter 760. Taizu wanted to stop the crystal, but the pressure around him was too heavy. Even he could not bear it. Fortunately, the crystal stopped in mid-air. It floated quietly in mid-air. The green light was like water ripples, rippling in all directions. It was dazzling. The surrounding stone walls were illuminated with a faint green color. The heaven-wrecking holy seed inside was clearly visible. Taizu held his breath. This was the closest he had ever been to the Tian baby. At a glance, it was no different from an ordinary medicinal herb seed. Who would have thought that such a small thing would have the power to destroy the world? Fortunately, with the layer of crystal as a barrier, its aura and pressure were basically blocked. If it really appeared and was completely exposed, who knew what kind of terrifying situation it would be? Taizu turned around and glanced at Chu Liyue. Her eyes were closed as she cultivated in peace, allowing the surrounding energy of heaven and earth to quickly enter her body. Taizu's expression was solemn. To be able to meet the Tian baby was undoubtedly a great opportunity. However, this kind of opportunity was not something that everyone could afford to accept. The slightest bit of carelessness could cost one's life. I wonder if the girl can survive this time. While Taizu was filled with worry, Chu Liyue's aura had already quietly increased. All the energy flowed through her limbs and bones into her dantian, and finally disappeared into the water droplet. After being tempered, the water droplet spat out the pure force and poured it into Chu Liyue's body. Under the imperceptible influence, the power contained in Chu Liyue's muscles, bones, blood, and flesh were all improved. Time passed bit by bit. Chu Liyue was completely immersed in her cultivation, so she did not notice the passage of time. However, for Taizu, this waiting time was especially unbearable. Gradually, he realized that the situation was not what he had expected. This was because Chu Liyue had already devoured too much energy. According to her current realm, she should have reached her limit long ago. However, Chu Liyue's expression did not change. His expression was calm and there was not the slightest difference. Streaks of dark green light, containing abundant power, all entered her body. This isn't right. The Taizu widened his eyes in disbelief. Chu Liyue's body. Why does it seem like a bottomless pit? He knew that Chu Liyue had a few trump cards and was much stronger than ordinary cultivators. But wasn't this too exaggerated? For some reason, Taizu suddenly recalled that when Chu Liyue was polishing the Cloud Sky Copper Sword, he had forced the Tianlei to stay on the sword for a long time. In the end, he had gone up and pulled it down himself. It was a different approach to achieve the same result as the current situation. None of these were things that normal people could do. The Taizu looked at Chu Liyue with a headache. He was both happy and worried. He was happy that Chu Liyue's cultivation talent and potential seemed to be better than he had expected. After all, she was a descendant of his bloodline. The Taizu really didn't know how to dote on her now. He was worried that Chu Liyue had devoured so much energy all of a sudden, and it was even taken from the Tian baby. Would she really be fine? If that thing exploded, even his old bones wouldn't be able to help much. He turned his gaze slightly and looked at the red-tailed phoenix that was guarding Chu Liyue. It had been standing there from the beginning. At some point in time, its body was enveloped in a layer of dark green light. It was Chu Liyue's contracted magical beast. Naturally, it would be affected when Chu Liyue's strength increased. However, compared to his worries, The red-tailed phoenix retracted its wings and closed its eyes. It seemed to be much more at ease. It was as if it wasn't worried that anything would happen to Chu Luiyue. Buzz. Right at this moment, a loud boom suddenly came from the crystal. The Taizu immediately turned around and was shocked to see that the last seal on it had finally dissipated. The crystal began to vibrate slightly. In an instant, the surrounding light began to surge back towards the crystal. The light that had filled the entire space retreated at a speed visible to the naked eye like a receding tide. Soon the surroundings dimmed and finally fell into complete darkness. The Taizu's heart tightened as he took a step closer to Chu Luiyue. The aura around his body instantly accumulated. At this moment the air seemed to have completely frozen. Just as the Taizu was about to think of a way to bring Chu Luiyue away from this place, a speck of starlight suddenly appeared in the darkness. Gradually the speck of starlight began to expand. The light lit up and it was indeed the same crystal. However, at this moment, there was only a faint green glow left on the crystal. For some reason, the Taizu felt that this light was different from the one he had seen before. A halo of light spread out from the crystal. Wherever it passed, space collapsed. A large patch of darkness appeared. The halo of light was transparent and revealed an extremely light layer of green. The Taizu knew that something was wrong. Just as he was about to exert his strength, he suddenly realized that his strength was completely suppressed and could not be used at all. Soon, the halo of light spread to this side and gently passed through the translucent soul of the Taizu. Then it arrived in front of Chu Luiyue and enveloped her. To the Taizu's relief, this did not seem to have any effect on Chu Luiyue. When the halo of light spread to the edge of the surrounding stone walls, it finally stopped. If someone were to look down from above, this place would look like a huge green amber. The Taizu looked up and saw an endless darkness. He frowned slightly. The Tian baby should have swallowed all the energy from the outside world. Next he was afraid that, Buzz. After a short moment of silence, the crystal trembled even more violently. It seemed that the Tian baby wanted to completely break free from it. The Taizu stared at it closely, his heart in his throat. This Tian baby was not as big as the one he had seen before, and its power should not be as terrifying. However, if it really came out, it would be difficult to control it. Within the halo of light, all the energy from the outside world had already been divided up by Chu Luiyue and the Tian baby. A crazy suction force spread out from the crystal. It seemed that it wanted to take back the energy in Chu Luiyue's body. The black shield in front of Chu Luiyue began to shake because of the cracks in the ground. At this moment, Chu Luiyue suddenly opened her eyes. 2 red flames were burning in her eyes. She stared at the Tian baby and slowly raised her hand. A transparent water droplet suddenly appeared in front of her. She gently moved her hand forward. Bang! The water droplet splashed. In an instant, it condensed into a water curtain in front of her. That terrifying suction force was immediately blocked outside. Chu Luiyue's hand moved slightly and made a grabbing motion in the air. The crystal was actually coming toward her. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 761. However, the crystal seemed to have sensed the danger and released an extremely strong aura. In the end, it stopped 10 steps away from the water curtain. But this time it didn't try to snatch Chu Luiyue's power. Chu Luiyue tried again and realized that she couldn't make it move forward, so she gave up. She stared at the crystal for a while and chuckled. I hate it when people snatch my things. As if it was afraid, the crystal suddenly took a step back. Taizu. What's going on? It's different from what I expected again. The Tian baby is hidden in the crystal, but it's actually afraid of Chu Luiyue. Even though Taizu had seen how domineering Chu Luiyue was when she dealt with Tianlei, he still felt that the impact was too great and hard to digest. To be honest, although this thing was the one who pulled Chu Luiyue down, it was actually Chu Luiyue who was snatching its energy now. After all, the energy that Chu Luiyue swallowed was collected by this Tian baby. However, Chu Luiyue was so self-righteous, as if the Tian baby was really taking advantage of her. Taizu felt a headache coming on again. He had stayed in the Tianling god realm for thousands of years, but he didn't know when the Tian baby had become so cowardly. Has the world really changed? Taizu looked at the crystal with a complicated expression and found it hard to accept. He could even clearly hear the sound of something collapsing in his heart. Ever since he got together with Chu Liyue, this kind of thing happened from time to time. Many things in the world have become inconceivable. Most importantly, she herself seems to be used to it and doesn't think she's that cruel. There probably aren't many people in the entire continent who would dare to threaten the Tu Tian baby with this kind of tone. Taizu looked at the scene in front of him and fell into deep thought. Of course, the Tu Tian baby wouldn't be afraid of a stage 5 warrior. The key should be that water curtain. This water curtain wasn't big and was only about the height of a person. It just happened to appear in front of Chu Liyue and separated her from the Tu Tian baby. The Tu Tian baby seemed to be very afraid of this water curtain and refused to get close to it. It didn't even hesitate to give up the energy that Chu Liyue had swallowed. After a short silence, the crystal began to vibrate again. But this time, compared to before, he was much more restrained. The surrounding space gradually became viscous. Chu Liyue's eyes narrowed. However, the great ancestor seemed to have suddenly thought of something and gasped in shock. Taizu, what's wrong? Asked Chu Liyue in confusion. Taizu, to the crystal, to the crystal, to the crystal, to the crystal, 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 the crystal, the crystal, 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 crystal. It controls this space. Have you noticed that this place seems to be different? Chu Liyue nodded. The speed of the energy flow seems to have slowed down. Taizu paused and said with difficulty. This is because the flow of time here has slowed down. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. She knew what this meant. Legend had it that those who had broken through to stage 9 could create their own divine territory. And in that divine territory, everything could be controlled at will, including the flow of time. The stronger one was, the more amazing their control in this aspect. There were many benefits to slowing down the flow of time. For example, cultivators could enter it to cultivate, and they could also cultivate some natural treasures. If 1 day in the outside world was equivalent to 10 days in the divine territory, then it was equivalent to increasing one's cultivation speed by 10 times. Medicinal herbs that took 100 years to grow could be harvested in 10 years. In short, the benefits were countless. But wasn't that something that only the legendary top powerhouses could do? Even someone as strong as Taizu only left behind an incomplete Tianling divine territory back then, and he couldn't do this. And this Tu Tian baby, rumor has it that the Tu Tian baby can do this. Taizu frowned and nodded. Only then did Chu Liyue realize that the Tu Tian baby seemed to be stronger than she had imagined. It probably wants to trap you here. The long time would probably be very difficult to endure. If Chu Liyue couldn't endure it, it would give it a chance. At that time, this is good. Chu Liyue's eyes lit up as she said happily. What? Taizu was confused. You're not worried that it will trap you here forever? It was dark here and she was alone. Even if she wasn't afraid, wouldn't she feel lonely after a long time? One had to know that being in such an environment for a long time could definitely drive people crazy. Even with him around, it wouldn't be easy to endure. Who knew when they would be able to get out? Chu Liyue blinked and smiled. What's there to worry about? I think we can take advantage of this opportunity to cultivate. Can you tell how much slower the flow of time here is compared to the outside world? Taizu hesitated for a moment and said, probably. A day in the outside world is equivalent to a month here. But here there is no sun or moon, so it should be difficult to know how much time has passed. Chu Liyue smiled and took out an hourglass from her universe ring. That's not a problem. This hourglass counts for an entire day, and it will automatically turn over when it's full. I'm afraid I'll have to trouble you to help me pay more attention in the future. She entered a cultivation state and had no concept of time. With Taizu's help, it would be much more convenient. Taizu clicked his tongue. You have a lot of things with you. You even have this. Chu Liyue coughed. In fact, she didn't prepare this for herself. When Rong Xiu gave her the universe ring, she had a lot of things with her. She had checked it when she was bored. In addition to money and all kinds of treasures, there were many miscellaneous things in it. Among them was this hourglass. She didn't expect it to come in handy at this time. Since you've already made up your mind, I won't say anything more. As you said, this is indeed a rare opportunity. As long as you can get out of here in the end, it won't be a problem. Chu Liyue nodded. Don't worry, I know what to do. Compared to ordinary people and even most cultivation geniuses, her cultivation speed was already extremely fast. But it was far from enough. The opponents she had to face were the most powerful people in the Tianling dynasty, who could almost cover the sky with one hand. Even if she had a lot of trump cards, she was still inferior to them. Now that she could take advantage of this opportunity to improve her cultivation speed, she was naturally very happy. As for Taizu's worry about whether she could get through it, he had experienced so much pain and torment in the past. What did this mean to him now? Chu Luiyue closed her eyes and put her hands on her knees, palms facing up. The water curtain swayed gently. Crack. On the crystal, a fragment suddenly fell down. Digression. At 6 o'clock, mobile users please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 762. The fragment was very thin, only the size of a fingernail. Looked very inconspicuous. However, when Taizu saw this scene, a trace of shock flashed across his face. Without the suppression of the seal, the crystal began to shatter. Just as he was extremely nervous, he saw the fragment flying towards Chu Luiyue. The fragment was pale green, crystal clear, and contained an extremely majestic power. Wherever it passed, the viscous space was almost cut apart. Just like that, it slowly and steadily flew to the front of the water curtain. Then an amazing scene happened. The fragment did not directly pass through the water curtain. Instead, it gradually melted silently. Soon, a faint green color appeared on the transparent water curtain. Then a faint green water droplet gently condensed and flew towards Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue swallowed the water droplet naturally, and then converted the energy contained in it into her own force. The aura on her body strengthened again. The whole process was smooth and there was no pause at all. Taizu opened his mouth, but suddenly felt that he was at a loss for words. Wasn't Chu Luiyue equivalent to swallowing the power accumulated by the Tu Tian baby in a disguised form? Did he just take the energy from the crystal for himself just like that? Looking at Chu Luiyue's calm face, and even her complexion was a little rosy, Taizu suddenly felt that his previous worries were unnecessary. The heaven-wrecking holy seed is formidable, but when it meets Chu Luiyue, who doesn't play by the rules, it was still unknown who would be able to outplay the other. Taizu thought for a moment and simply retreated a few steps from the position in front of Chu Luiyue to the right front of her, making it easier for her to snatch the power of the Tu Tian baby more smoothly. Looking at the red-tailed phoenix, who was very calm from the beginning to the end, Taizu faintly thought that it should have known that Chu Luiyue would do such a thing. As expected, he took after his master. His arrogant and disdainful temperament was exactly the same. After putting down the initial worry in his heart, Taizu calmed down a lot and began to stand by the side. Watch the show. Chu Luiyue was slowly killing time in the god's domain created by the Tu Tian baby. She was currently unable to leave, nor was she able to contact anyone from the outside world. She could only focus on her cultivation. On the other hand, Qin Yi and the rest didn't know about her current situation, so they were naturally very worried. Qin Yi felt a little uneasy as he stared at the faint dark green glow emitting from the broken branches. The inexplicable crack on the tree trunk made him tense up. The seal should have been completely destroyed. He remembered clearly that Chu Luiyue had been swallowed by the same color of light below. From the looks of it, it was very likely that they had already surged up from underground. If it were to erupt, it would be extremely dangerous. This made him even more worried about Chu Luiyue's current condition. Qin Yi held his breath and focused as he walked forward step by step and stood still in front of the tree trunk. This mother tree was very thick and strong. Standing in front of this tree trunk, he seemed very small. The leaves on the tree trunk had all fallen off cleanly. Standing close to the tree trunk, he could see countless tiny cracks on it. Every crack was filled with that strange light. It seemed like it would burst out the next moment. Qin Yi's muscles tensed up as he stretched his hand forward. However, before he could touch the tree trunk, the light suddenly dimmed. In just a split second, all the light in the tiny cracks disappeared. Soundless. This one Yeshan also finally stopped curling up and withered. The surroundings were so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Qin Yi paused for a moment. A silver light flashed in his hand and a sword appeared. He stared straight ahead as he held the sword with both hands and slowly but firmly slashed it down. Crack. The sword glinted coldly. A layer of bark was sliced off. A deep sword mark was left on the tree trunk. Qin Yi focused his gaze and realized that all the energy in the tree trunk had been swallowed, and it had become much more brittle because of its withered state. However, most of it couldn't be seen. That frightening aura seemed to have dissipated as well. After waiting for a while, there was silence and nothing happened. A light breeze blew over and Qin Yi felt a chill on his back. He closed his eyes, kept his sword and slowly retreated. Mu Hongyu and the rest watched nervously from behind. They didn't even dare to blink, afraid that they would miss something. Everyone was shocked when they saw Qin Yi actually turn around after sending out the sword. Lei Laosi couldn't hold it in and took 2 steps forward first. He hurriedly asked, "Big brother, how is it?" Qin Yi shook his head. Lei Laosi's face turned pale. The other people's expressions also froze. Qin Yi sighed and explained, "I can't be sure. What we can be sure of is that she is currently trapped by a strange force and is unable to come out. Originally that force should have rushed out, but for some reason, it retreated instead." Lei Laosi was dazed. "Big brother, you mean, you should still remember the scene when we first came here, right?" Qin Yi glanced at him and squinted his eyes slightly. "Back then the same thing happened to this mother tree. A force wanted to rush out, but that 9-colored heavenly pheasant appeared and repaired the seal, so that incident was left unsettled." Lei Laosi's eyes flickered and he nodded. In actual fact, the situation back then wasn't completely like that. How could the 9-colored heavenly pheasant do this alone? However, there was no need to tell these children this. So, is it still because of that 9-colored heavenly pheasant this time? No, it's already broken through to become a red-tailed phoenix. Perhaps it became even stronger? Qin Yi nodded. "It's not impossible." When Mu Hongyu and the rest heard this, they heaved a sigh of relief. This means that Lu Yu still has a high chance of coming out. The red-tailed phoenix is a legendary fiend. It should be able to help her, right? Mu Hongyu and Yi Ranran were both optimistic. Only Chang Wanzhou looked deeply at Qin Yi, pressed his lips tightly together and didn't say anything. "I've seen that scene before. The red-tailed phoenix definitely isn't a match for that force." However, Qin Yi clearly didn't want Mu Hongyu and Yi Ranran to know about this. "Then what should we do now? Can we only wait here for Lu Yu?" asked Yi Ranran with a frown. Qin Yi turned around and looked at that mother tree. "Let's hope so." At the border where the mystic forest and mirror lake connected, the appearance of the dancing lotus made Shangguanwan and the rest very excited. She immediately suggested for Mu Qinghe to retrieve the dancing lotus. Once she said that, the originally noisy surroundings instantly quietened down. Everyone looked at Mu Qinghe with different expressions. Curious, envious, worried. Everyone knew that Mirror Lake was dangerous. The first to go would definitely be the first to bear the brunt. Mu Qinghe kept quiet for a while and nodded. "Yes. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network." Chapter 763. Then Mu Qinghe turned around and walked in the direction of the dancing lotus. The boundary between the mystic forest and the mirror lake was very clear. In the middle was something like a dam. On one side was the thick ground of the mystic forest that was filled with fallen leaves, and on the other side was the mirror lake that was glistening with water. Surprisingly, the isolated dam was only an inch wide, but none of the leaves from the mystic forest flew to the lake on the other side. The waves on the lake also did not cross the dam and flow to the other side. There seemed to be an invisible barrier in the middle that separated the two sides clearly. Mu Qinghe soon arrived at the narrow dam. He took a deep breath, circulated the force in his body and swung his right hand. A long sword flew out. It floated in front of him. Mu Qinghe jumped and stood on the flying sword. Just as he was about to ride the sword forward, he inadvertently glanced at the lake and found that there seemed to be something sparkling on the surface of the lake. He squinted his eyes and looked over. Then he was stunned on the spot, because the sparkling thing was actually a piece of floating ice. The afterglow of the setting sun shone on it, and the clear, glass-like floating ice reflected the bright and dazzling light. The mirror lake was vast and boundless. Its borders were close to the mystic forest and the Red Moon Desert. It was like spring and summer all year round, and the water rippled. Why would such a piece of floating ice suddenly appear? "Vice Admiral Mu, is there a problem?" Shangguanwan saw that Mu Qinghe was not moving and could not help but urge him. Mu Qinghe did not respond immediately. Instead he looked around. Sure enough, he saw another piece of floating ice not far away. This piece of floating ice was quietly floating on the surface of the lake. It was inconspicuous. If not for the fact that Mu Qinghe happened to be standing in the sky in the afterglow of the setting sun, he would definitely not have noticed it. For example, Sheng Wanwan and the others did not see this strange situation. Mu Qinghe felt a little uneasy. This mirror lake is strange. Sheng Wanwan frowned. What's strange? Mu Qinghe raised her hand and pointed. Floating ice has never appeared in Mirror Lake before. Sheng Wanwan looked at Mu Qinghe's serious expression and thought that something big had happened. Who would have thought that it was only because of 1 or 2 pieces of floating ice? She chuckled and said calmly, "That's right. It's just 2 pieces of floating ice. It shouldn't be a big deal, right? If Vice Admiral Mu is really worried, why don't we get the dancing lotus back as soon as possible and leave immediately?" Mu Qinghe's frown deepened. Third Princess, you may not know this, but this Mirror Lake has always been like this for a long time. There has never been such a situation before. I'm afraid that something strange has happened. For safety's sake, it's better for everyone to evacuate immediately. Sheng Wanwan was stunned. Evacuate immediately? What about the dancing lotus? It wasn't easy for them to meet, so how could they leave just like that? What should he say when he returned to the West Hill? Also, her Yuan Meridian. Vice Admiral Mu, this consort thinks that you're worrying too much. I know that you've been in Dahuang Swamp for many years and know this place very well. But how many years has Mirror Lake existed? Do you dare to say that it has been like this since the day it existed? It is also possible that it has already appeared in a similar situation when you were unaware of it. What do you think? Mu Qinghe couldn't refute her words. Sheng Wanwan had made up her mind to take the dancing lotus back. If Vice Admiral Mu is really worried, why don't we invite Elder Qiushi along? Elder Qiushi didn't show any fear or worry when he heard this. Instead, he was excited. I'll naturally obey Third Princess's orders. Retrieving the dancing lotus would undoubtedly be a great achievement. Furthermore, it was a rare natural treasure and its entire body was extremely precious. Even just touching it might be very beneficial. As for danger, there was nothing here except for the lake water. It wasn't as complicated as the Mystic Forest. Even if they encountered any danger, they could just run back. How dangerous could it be? Sheng Wanwan nodded. Then I'll have to trouble Elder Qiushi and Vice Admiral Mu. Elder Qiushi responded and quickly rushed to Mu Qinghe's side. Mu Qinghe glanced at him. Since he wanted to die, there was nothing to persuade him. Vice Admiral Mu, please. Elder Qiushi raised his hand. Mu Qinghe didn't say anything else. She rode on her sword and continued forward. Elder Qiushi followed closely behind. His eyes were already glued to the dancing lotus in the center of the lake in the distance. Mu Qinghe looked down from time to time, and her expression gradually turned cold. Because she realized that there were more than 2 pieces of floating ice on the lake. The closer they went to the center, the more floating ice there were. And they gradually gathered together to form a large ice surface. And that translucent dancing lotus was already surrounded by a layer of ice. Mu Qinghe stopped. Elder Qiushi hurriedly stopped as well. Vice Admiral Mu, why aren't you continuing forward? The dancing lotus is right in front of you. You can retrieve it soon. Mu Qinghe's face seemed to be covered with a layer of frost. There was definitely something wrong with this Mirror Lake. He had been to Mirror Lake many times, and whenever he got close he would encounter all kinds of dangerous situations. But this time the Mirror Lake was too calm. Not only did this not make him feel at ease, but it also made him feel even more uneasy. There must be something wrong when things are abnormal. Elder Qiushi, since you want the dancing lotus so much, why don't you go first? Elder Qiushi was a little scared. His gaze wandered back and forth between Mu Qinghe and the dancing lotus. He was in a dilemma. He really wanted to retrieve the dancing lotus, but he was also afraid that something would happen. Mu Qinghe's reaction really didn't make one feel at ease. Seeing that the 2 of them had stopped, Sheng Wanwan couldn't help but urge them. Elder Qiushi made up his mind. There were so many people here anyway. What was there to worry about? If he was the one who retrieved the dancing lotus, his status would definitely rise when he returned to West Hill. At the thought of this, the balance in his heart finally leaned towards the side of greed. He walked past Mu Qinghe and approached. However, he wasn't stupid. He didn't use his hands to retrieve it. Such a treasure was definitely not that easy to obtain. He waved his sleeve and threw out a rope as thick as a thumb, wrapping it around the branch of the dancing lotus. After waiting for a moment, there was nothing unusual. Elder Qiushi felt a little more confident. He pulled his wrist back, trying to pull the dancing lotus out. However, just as he moved, the rope slid down the branch. Elder Qiushi missed his target. He looked up in shock and realized that the branch was extremely smooth. There was a faint luster on it, and it was indeed very difficult to bind it with a rope. He thought for a moment and set up a barrier around himself. At the same time, he put away the rope and used his sword. He approached step by step and finally raised his sword to slash. However, just as the sword came into contact with the branch, it actually slipped. Before Elder Qiushi could react, his body was pulled down by an invisible force. Plop. It penetrated the ice layer and fell into the lake. Digression. 6:30 p.m. February has been abolished. Sob 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 sob. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 764. A hole instantly appeared on the smooth and flat ice surface. A few drops of lake water splashed out, but Elder Qiushi's figure had already completely sunk into the lake and disappeared. In fact, he didn't even have the time to cry out in alarm. Mu Qinghe, who was standing closest to him, had a change in expression and his pupils constricted. The entire thing happened too suddenly. Before he could react, everything had already ended. He didn't even have the chance to take action. When Shangguan and the rest, who were standing far away, saw this scene, they were all stunned on the spot. Especially Shangguan. She was originally waiting happily and expectantly for Elder Qiushi to retrieve the dancing lotus. She was about to succeed, but she didn't expect. She didn't even see what exactly happened. No. Wasn't everything fine? In just the blink of an eye, Elder Qiushi suddenly fell into the water. Shangguan widened her eyes in shock. After Elder Qiushi fell into the water, he didn't make a single sound. Especially now, when the water surface seemed to have regained its calmness. Under normal circumstances, anyone who fell into the water would struggle and ask for help. But Elder Qiushi didn't. There's only one possibility: he's already dead. In that short moment, Shangguan clutched her chest, and her footsteps faltered as she instinctively grabbed Jiang Yuqing's arm. Yuqing, what happened just now? Jiang Yuqing knitted his brows tightly and spoke in a low voice. He seemed to have been dragged down by something, but I didn't see it clearly either. Shangguan's throat was dry, and she felt both fearful and relieved. Luckily, I didn't go over personally just now. If not, I would be the one dead. But Elder Qiushi is a stage 7 warrior. How can it be? To be able to take his life in such a short period of time, it's enough to show how scary it is. If it were someone else, they might die even faster than me. Jiang Yuqing's face was also very dark. Elder Duanmu Chun is already gone. Now even Elder Qiushi is. This trip was much more dangerous than he had expected. Shangguan lowered her eyes and her eyes flashed. She was the one who killed Elder Duanmu Chun, but Jiang Yuqing didn't seem to know. He probably thought that she would only attack these young geniuses, right? Little did they know that she had long found Elder Duanmu Chun an eyesore. This was because Duanmu Chun was not her confidant, and he had always been on good terms with Shangguan Yu. Elder Duanmu Chun had an amiable temperament. Although he was an elder of the royal family, he had never participated in the affairs of the royal family. Even though Shangguan Yu admired him back then, he did not become her man. He had always kept to himself. He was still the same when he came to Shangguan. Most people wouldn't care, but Shangguan couldn't stand it. Moreover, he always used Shangguan Yu's standards when she was in power to measure everything she did. This violated Shangguan's taboo. Therefore, she might as well take this opportunity to get rid of Elder Duanmu Chun. However, this was not important. Anyway, many people had died in her hands. One more didn't make a difference. Those who couldn't be used by her were dead. It was a pity that Elder Qiushi died. After the initial shock, she finally regained her senses. She looked at Mu Qinghe with suppressed anger. Vice Admiral Mu, what's going on? You were close to Elder Qiushi. Why didn't you help? She even suspected that Mu Qinghe did it on purpose. He had always disliked Elder Qiushi. Mu Qinghe said coldly. The last general also wanted to help, but he didn't have the strength. Even Elder Qiushi didn't have the strength to retaliate. Could it be that Your Highness, the third princess, thought that this general was still some distance away from Elder Qiushi just now? Could it be that this general could reach him first if he made a move later? Shang Wanwan choked. Mu Qinghe's words made sense. Everyone clearly saw the situation just now. Mu Qinghe probably didn't have time to help. The last general already said that there's something wrong with Mirror Lake. Now you finally believe it, right? Mu Qinghe's words made Shang Wanwan's face turn red and white. Wasn't saying this in front of so many people the same as publicly criticizing her? Mu Qinghe took one last look at the spot where Elder Qiushi disappeared. There seemed to be a faint green light flashing by. He narrowed his eyes and was about to take a closer look when a layer of ice formed on the surface again. That ice hole was quickly repaired and looked exactly the same as before. It was impossible to tell that it had once shattered and that a person had fallen in. More and more layers of ice began to form on the surface of the lake in the distance. Mu Qinghe said in a low voice. Third princess, eldest young master, it's better for us to leave Mirror Lake as soon as possible. In the quiet and sticky space, Chu Liyue sat cross-legged and was cultivating peacefully. Not far away on the opposite side, the crystal quietly floated. Suddenly, the layer of faint green light on the outside fluctuated. Then a faint green light passed through the light and headed toward the crystal. Chu Liyue seemed to have sensed something and opened her eyes. Seeing the light, she raised her eyebrows slightly and muttered softly. It has a lot of tricks up its sleeve. The energy in the mystic forest should have been completely devoured by it. She didn't expect it to be able to get such an abundant energy. Chu Liyue's red lips curved. With a slight thought, the water curtain shook gently. The ball of light was about to fly to the crystal and was about to merge with it. However, when the water curtain moved, the ball of light also seemed to be pulled by something and flew over in a wobbly manner. Like the previous fragment, the light silently merged with the water curtain and finally turned into a water droplet and arrived in front of Chu Liyue. Chu Liyue's eyes curved. Since you're so polite, I'll kindly accept it. After saying that, she swallowed the energy of the water droplet. Taizu, who was standing at the side, raised his eyebrows fiercely and glanced at the crystal. It was trembling slightly. It wasn't the kind that wanted to break out forcefully. It was because of anger. Digression. I didn't add any new chapters today. Because I ate the updated chapters. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 765. For the first time, Taizu felt that the two-tian baby was a little pitiful. It had finally broken the seal, and just as it was about to break out, Chu Liyue appeared out of nowhere. Not only did she snatch the energy it had gathered, she even snatched it several times. It didn't know how she had gotten this energy, or if Chu Liyue had forcibly snatched it away. Who wouldn't be angry when the duck in their mouth flew away? The key point was that Taizu was still afraid of Chu Liyue. If it wasn't for the water curtain, Taizu believed that Chu Liyue would definitely not be a match for the two-tian baby. But how could there be so many ifs in the world? Speaking of which, it was Taizu who had forcibly pulled Chu Liyue down. He was just asking for trouble. Taizu put his hands in his sleeves and laughed. According to the current development of the situation, the chances of the two-tian baby coming out were even slimmer. It was hard to say who would be able to endure who. Chu Liyue's aura was still increasing. She carefully and patiently refined all of this energy, transforming it into her own force. Her flesh, blood, tendons, and bones became more and more resilient under the cleansing of this pure energy. Time slowly passed. At a certain moment, Chu Liyue's aura skyrocketed. Crack. A slight sound came from within her body. Chu Liyue's strength had finally advanced to the middle stage of stage 5. Taizu noticed this movement and subconsciously glanced at the hourglass next to him, a trace of shock flashing through his eyes. Chu Liyue's breakthrough speed was too fast. Although he had already mentally prepared himself, it was still hard to believe that Chu Liyue had smoothly and quickly crossed the threshold of the middle stage. She had the Daijing Yuan Meridian. Although it couldn't be compared to the Tianjing Yuan Meridian, her cultivation speed was obviously faster than the average Daijing Yuan Meridian cultivator. Taizu put his hands behind his back and looked at Chu Liyue with a solemn gaze. When she was Shangguanyu, her cultivation had reached the peak of a rank 8 warrior and she was only one step away from becoming a rank 9 warrior. With such an experience, Chu Luiyue would undoubtedly take fewer detours when she cultivated in this life. Plus, she had many heaven-defying opportunities. Taizu sighed softly, his eyes flashing with admiration. Although it was a pity that Chu Luiyue didn't have the Tianjing Yuan Meridian, she had been able to come so far. He wondered what realm she would be able to reach by the time she got out of here. The outside world had no way of knowing what was happening underground. At this moment, Shangguanyu Yang faced a dilemma. On one hand, Yu of the lotus flower. On the other hand, he hadn't obtained the dancing lotus yet. It would be a pity to leave just like that. After Mu Qing has said that, everyone fell silent and looked at Shangguanyu. Even the sect disciples who had been admiring the beautiful scenery of Mirror Lake and were full of yearning were now nervous. In the beginning, no one took Mu Qing's warning to heart. But when something happened to Elder Qiushi, they immediately understood that this place was completely different from what they had expected. Mu Qing's words weren't alarmist words. She might even have been tactful. They came to the great desolate swamp mostly for the treasures here. But the premise was that they had to be alive. The dancing lotus was indeed a rare treasure, but if they had to pay with their lives for it, no one would continue to do it. Shangguanyu also knew this. At this time, it wasn't appropriate for her to send anyone. That would be sending them to their deaths. But she really wanted to get the dancing lotus. Jiang Yuqing saw that she seemed to be very conflicted and could roughly guess her thoughts. Everyone saw the scene just now. This Mirror Lake is indeed strange. If we stay any longer, I'm afraid the casualties will be even more serious. It's better to evacuate first. Anyway, the dancing lotus is here and it will bloom for a few years. Let's go back to Xiling first and think of a way to get it later. Shangguanyu was still a little hesitant. But, what if something happens during this time? You've seen how difficult it is to deal with the dancing lotus. Even Elder Qiushi couldn't escape. Who can easily take it away? Shangguanyu thought about it and felt that his words made sense. In the entire Tianling dynasty, there weren't many people who were stronger than Elder Qiushi. As long as the news of the dancing lotus's appearance wasn't leaked, there shouldn't be too much of a problem. Jiang Yuqing looked at her and his voice became gentler. Also, you need to go back and recuperate as soon as possible. It won't delay anything if you come back after you've recovered. These words finally convinced Shangguanyu. Her body and face both needed to be recuperated. With the Mirror Lake in this state, she definitely wouldn't have the chance to make a move on anyone. It was better to go back to Xiling first. Perhaps she could find a suitable person and opportunity. She thought for a moment and finally nodded. After Shangguanyu agreed, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. The two royal elders who came with them had both died. The danger of the Dahuang swamp was obvious. If they were a little unlucky, they might be the ones who died. Under Mu Qing's command, everyone began to evacuate. However, compared to the excitement they had when they came, everyone now looked dejected and disappointed. They had all come with all kinds of expectations, but who knew that they would end up with nothing and almost lose their lives? Because there were more injured people, Zhu Hong and the others from Dragon Teeth Mountain walked at the back. However, compared to the other sects, they were luckier. Although they had many injured people, their survival rate was extremely high. No one died. Just this point alone was enough to make people envious. After all, the disciples who came here were all famous geniuses from various sections. The death of any one of them was a great loss to them. However, the most miserable was not the few weaker sects in Tianji Manor, but the Purple Shao Sword sect. They came with 10 people. When they returned, only 3 people were left. One of them was even the Purple Shao Sword sect's young master, Song Qingyan. Although the remaining 2 saved their lives, they were seriously injured. Their future cultivation might be affected. Who would have thought that the high-spirited Purple Shao Sword sect would end up like this in the end? The sky had already completely darkened. A bright moon rose into the sky, scattering its light. Everyone traveled for a long time and finally returned to the border area of the 3 places. Standing here again, everyone's mood was already completely different from before. On the left, the once lush mystic forest had already become a wilderness. The ground was rugged and uneven. Withered branches and withered leaves covered it, mixed with withered tree trunks and festering tree roots. At a glance, it was like a ghost domain. A sinister aura enveloped the area. Just looking at it from afar made one shudder. Zhu Hong could not help but look at Mu Qinghe and ask softly, Vice Admiral Mu Hongyu and the rest are still inside. Shall we wait for them? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.